Thanks for coming today. It's always a joy to come to Alabama. I'm a Kentucky boy. I grew up in southeastern Kentucky, a little place called Burnside. It's right on Lake Cumberland. It's about 90 miles south of Lexington. I went to school at the University of Kentucky. I started out as a civil engineer. My father was a graduate civil engineer, and that's really all I wanted to do. He taught me to hold the dumb end of a chain when I was about 11 years old to go surveying, and told me to use a slide rule, and that's all I ever wanted to do is build roads. I graduated in '73, went to work for the Department of Transportation in Kentucky. Became a Christian when I was 11, but I didn't really know what that meant. I just didn't want to go to hell. And my mother caught me on the front porch stealing one of my dad's cigarettes. And I knew after she caught me that I was going to hell. I smelled like it, and that switch she had me cut from that willow tree in the backyard, I knew that was part of hell. So, but anyway, when I was 24, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I haven't drank alcohol since February the 15th, 1976. But before that, I thought they was going to quit making beer, so I just thought I'd drink it all. And I about bottomed out. I had a great job and making a lot of money, but my life was empty. And on February the 15th, I turned my life over to the Lord as a 24-year-old man, and God took alcohol away. It wasn't no recovery. To me, it took a pair of bolt cutters and just set me free. And I started going to church. I hadn't been to church much. I'd go to weddings, get under conviction. And, so I'd go to church. This church in Somerset called Beacon Hill, and every time the preacher stand to preach, the Holy Spirit said, "That's what I want you to do." And I'd look around and think, anybody else hearing this? I mean, I was a pagan. I was wild, and I'm not proud of it. I had a vulgar mouth, but God changed all that, And then He asked me, "What do you want me to do in my life?" And every time the preacher stand to preach, the Holy Spirit said, "That's what I want you to do." And so this was back in the bouffant hairdos. Y'all remember that? And so I thought, well, I'll just hide. I'll find a woman in church with the biggest hair. And so I got behind her and on one Sunday morning, and Ansel Gamble, the preacher, stood up to preach and split that hair right down the middle. The Holy Spirit said, "That's what I want you to do." So on Easter Sunday that year, 1976, April 16th, I walked down the aisle and took the preacher's hand. I said, "You ain't going to believe this." He said, "God's called you to preach." I said, "How'd you know that?" He said, "I've known that for some time."
Wow.
So I went to seminary. I went to seminary in Louisville. I ended up transferring with the highway department and worked there. I wasn't married yet. Met my wife. She was a godly woman. She was praying to marry a preacher. I think she got over that later. Repented of that sin. But I worked as an engineer the whole time I was in seminary. But then when I got out of seminary, I was pastoring a little church outside Cincinnati. And I had to decide, was I going into ministry, or was I going to go be an engineer, or was I going to be bivocational? And I had an opportunity to go to they call it a full-time church. They run about 75 in a place called Felicity, Ohio. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. Little town, about 1,000 people. But I learned a lot there. I learned about Sunday school. I learned really. I had to go back to them after I left there, and I went back and apologized to them for all the mistakes I made, because I did a lot of stupid stuff. It's hard to coach stupid. It really is. I got a friend of mine, pastors, is a transitional pastor here in Alabama. I'm not going to tell you where I went because you all got relatives there. But he got up a few months ago and said to his church that we're all about, we're all about 30 minutes from stupidity. Well, that week before I was doing a weekend revival for him, and so he was telling me, that this guy, one of the Sunday school teachers, done something pretty stupid, but he didn't tell me exactly what it was. So at the end of the service that day, this guy comes down front and says to brother, I ain't going to tell you who it is now, but anyway, says to the pastor, said, "I'd like to say something to the church." And Wendy said, "Okay." And he said, "Brother Billy said last week we was all about 30 minutes from stupid." And he said, "I did something real stupid this week." His neighbor had a dog, a pit bull, that he'd been letting run loose. and chasing his cattle. And he told him if he didn't get his dog under control, he's going to take an action. Well, this dog killed one of his calves, and he snapped and went to the guy's house, knocked on his front door, and the dog came running at him, still had the blood on his, and he took his 9mm and shot the dog right in the head.
Oh.
And he said, "Please don't take my Sunday school class away from me." I'm not kidding you. He said, "I did something real stupid." Oh Lord, you can't make this stuff up. Live church, boys, is crazy. So anyway, I was there 3.5 years. Just made a lot of mistakes, but I learned about Sunday school. I learned about seeing people come to Christ. When I first got back in church in February, the pastor said, I told him, I said, "I need to be in church. I got to get out of the bars and all that." And he said, "Well, come go visit with me." So I was living in Lexington, and this was Somerset, but I'd drive down on Monday nights and go visit with him. And so we went out to visit this couple, and we sat down and we got to talking, and he looked at me and said, "Danny, tell them what happened to you last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever." And so I told him what Jesus done in my life. And I didn't know to ask the question. I just said, "Anything ever like that happened to you?" And they said, "No." I said, "Well, would you want it to?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, Brother Gamble's going to tell you." And sure enough, right then, I saw the light come on in two people's eyes.
Yeah, Lord.
And I'm telling you, I ain't never got over it.
That's right.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing like it. Let me tell you how you lead change. You introduce people to Jesus.
That's right. Amen.
There's all kinds of books about revitalization, and there's all kinds of strategies. We're going to talk about some of that stuff today. But I'm going to tell you, the most important change that comes in a person's life is when they meet Jesus.
That's right. Yeah.
And so our job is to introduce boys and girls, men and women to Jesus. One of the things that burdened me in Kentucky when I was evangelism director, I left Ohio, went to Henderson, Kentucky, pastored a church there. 16 years. It was a rural church that was founded in 1853. It never had a pastor more than 6 years, and that was only once. Most of them were 3-year in-out guys. I stayed 16 years and 4 months. They say, "How'd you stay that long?" Well, I never got my crisis and my pulpit committees worked out just right. When they showed up, I didn't want to leave, and vice versa. But we grew from about 150, which they've been like that since right after the Second World War. And when I left, we was running over 500. We built 5 times. We'd gone from 2 acres to 14, no staff, me to 8 staff members. But we did it primarily through people getting saved. I didn't want your disgruntled church members. In fact, I tried to round them off. I'd go to a meeting with the association, and I'd have 4 or 5 in my pocket, and I said, "I'll trade you 5 for 1. Let me get rid of these 5. You got a good one, let me get it." But then I was recruited to come to Kentucky to be the director of evangelism. And part of my burden was how many churches in Kentucky, their statistic on evangelism was 0. And it was like that for a long time. As I just don't understand how people that know Jesus can't tell people that don't know Jesus about Jesus. You become a grandparent, you become an instant evangelist. You'll talk to some. Got any grandparents?
Yeah.
How many? What you got?
3 boys and 4th on the way, and not till.
Is that a boy or girl?
Boy, 4 boys.
Well, the first one is you became an idiot. That's right. You lose your mind. You start talking like a baby. Everything changes. And I was standing in Walmart in Louisville when I was evangelism director, and this woman was standing in front of me, and there was this picture on one of these tabloids of a preschooler. And she looked at me and she said, "It looks like my grandson." And I said, "Well, tell me about your grandson." I didn't know her from anybody. And he said, "Well, he's 4 years old. he's doing division, long division. He's, smartest, brightest child ever walked on the face of the earth. And I asked people all over Kentucky, tell me about your grandchildren. One lady opened the front of her Bible and had a 5 by 7 of her granddaughter. You got it. Oh Lord, yeah. So why do we talk to people about our grandkids? Because we love them. You see, change can only happen when it happens in me.
Mm-hmm.
So the process of change then has to be rooted and grounded in our own change and introducing people to Jesus. Because without that, it's sterile. It's void. One of the things I worked on at Lifeway was called Transformational Church. We did a major research project all across the country, and I was tasked with going to Minnesota and Washington State and visiting churches that had these metrics or that were growing. So I flew to Minneapolis, drove 4 hours north almost to Canada, a place called Nashwauk, Minnesota. It's up in the iron ore country. To visit this church, I went to see a guy named Carl Emerson. It was a Christian Alliance church that had grown from, say, 50 to running almost 300 in a town of 300.
It was a team.
And I got there, and so I sat down, had my laptop. I was asking questions. Finally, I shut the laptop, and I said, Carl, tell me how this happened. I said, there's nobody up here. How are you running 300 people? He said, well, we draw from about 20 miles.
I don't know.
But then I said, well, tell me, what happened? He said, well, 5 years ago, I was ready to quit. He said, my dad's a state farm agent in Minneapolis. He wanted me to come go and visit him. Church wasn't doing anything. And I was just, I was stagnant. And so I decided I was going to resign. And the Holy Spirit said to me, before you resign, I want you to take your Bible and get away for 2 days, just with the Bible and hear it. Meetings. And he said, the first day I opened the Bible and started reading, the Holy Spirit said, I want you to write down everything you're doing that requires me.
Mm-hmm.
He said I couldn't write down one thing.
Sure.
And the Holy Spirit said, I've been telling you to do stuff for the last couple of years, and you've been afraid to do it. He said, I want you to go back and be the kind of pastor that if I don't show up, you're going to look like an idiot. Mm-hmm. And he started crying. And he said, Dan, transformation started in this church when it started in me.
That's right. Yeah, so.
If you don't have a story of transformation, go sell cars. Go do something else. I think one reason that baptisms have gone from 25,000 to 10, it's happened in Kentucky. When I was there, we almost made 20,000. The last year I was evangelism director, and last year they didn't make 10. They had about 8.
Good ones.
I just think there's lack of passion in the pulpit.
Yeah.
I know Jesus. Do you? I don't know just about him. I know him.
That's right.
He's changed my life. So change then has to happen in us. And some of us, what we're trying to do is do a 3-year ministry about 12 times.
Good.
We're trying to do the same thing. And then we critique churches. We say, oh, they won't change. Well, the problem is we haven't changed. We've got to learn new skills. I don't understand everything that Alvin Toffler wrote. I certainly wouldn't agree with his theology. He's a futurist. I don't know if you've ever read some of his stuff. He was really popular back in the 90s before the turn of the 21st century. But he wrote this right after the turn of the century. And he said, the illiterate in the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, those who cannot learn, unlearn, relearn. You're here because you want to learn.
Yep.
You want to, maybe you need to unlearn some things. Or most of us know more than we do. And so maybe it's just applying some things that you've known, but you've just not ever done. So one of the things of strategic planning that I've learned over the years is that we try to do too much. And when we try to do too much, we don't do anything. I went to Lifeway in 07 to oversee pastoral ministries, and one of the principles by which Lifeway was organized in those days was called 4 Disciplines of Execution, called 4DX. It's a book that's out. It's pretty technical stuff, but basically they said that multitasking is a lie. And that if you try to do more than 2 things at once, you can't do it, you won't do any of them. And that's true in strategy planning. The old long-range planning, some of you are old enough to remember the green book that man put out, or Lifeway or somebody, and you'd come up with 12 things you wanted to do, and then you put all these objectives, and then you wouldn't do any of them. Well, the problem is you're trying to do too much. So we want you to think about what is the one thing, if you went back to your church or your association and not only tried to do it, but did it, executed it, made it a priority. What was the one thing that if you did it would impact everything else? And I don't know what that is for you, but we're going to talk about that today. We don't want you to leave here with 10 things. 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're going to help your church or your association or whatever you're involved in. And that's our prayer for you, is that it's this one thing done well changes everything. I've been teaching Philippians. I'm serving as a transitional pastor of a church north of Bowling Green, Kentucky, called Horse Cave. And the guy was there 27 years. And he's a really good pastor. The church has went through decline. But what I've been doing on Wednesdays, I do an online Bible study, and I've been kind of going verse by verse through Philippians. I started in September, and I just got done a few weeks ago. But one of the things that's jumped out of me, and all of us have studied and preached Philippians, but verse 27 of chapter 1 says, Paul says, just one thing. It's really the purpose of the book. Just one thing. Live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. One thing. And like most preachers, he goes over in chapter 3 and says, another one thing. But it's like saying finally, and then he goes on. But he says in verse 13 of chapter 3 of Philippians, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and reaching forward to what is ahead, I pursue as my goal the prize promised by God's heavenly call in Christ Jesus. One thing. Live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel. Are people surprised to find out that you're a Christian? I was visiting a hospital in Evansville, Indiana one time, and I was coming south on 41 back to Henderson, and there was a Wendy's there, and this car pulled out in front of me, and I tooted the horn at it. And when I went around them, they told me I was number 1. Well, then the guy looked at me and went, "Oh, Brother Dan." It's one of them stupid things you do. He was one of my Sunday school teachers.
Whoa.
He'd been outed. And so that Wednesday night he came all out his face. He was like that old boy stuff that dog.
Yeah.
Well, please don't take my son's school class away from me. He didn't quite say that, but he goes, "Oh, Brother Dan, I'm so sorry." And I said, "Well, but man, here's the deal. You need to live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel. Inflicting somebody else." I said, what witness would that have been? If they would said, "Well, that guy teaches Sunday school at Zion Baptist Church. He got to crying." And I said, "Man, you need to clean your act up." This church I'm in now, Horace Cave Baptist Church, there's a young man's 23 and he's got a vulgar mouth. And I was told about it. He's working children in Sunday school. I got in his face the other day and I said, look, if you keep that mouth, you're not going to teach these kids.
I sure am.
And I said, he said, well, I don't talk like that around them. I said, yeah, but you're talking around other people. And I'm already hearing about it at church. That you're working with these kids and your mouth is filthy. May the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable in my sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer.
Amen.
How we talk, how we live, where we go, who we're with. Live your mouth, live your lives in a manner worthy of God. It's one thing. What's the one thing you could do in your church that would impact the gospel, that would impact people, that would change the church? That's what we want you to think about. So strategy planning then is getting some laser focus. It's coming down to what are the one thing that we could do. It's called the domino effect. And, it's Gary Keller has written a book called The One Thing. He was a real estate tycoon, and he's also a believer. And it's a great book to read. And in it, he talks about this domino effect, that if you take one domino 2 inches tall and then the next one, you double it every time. It's called geometric progression. By the time you get to the 23rd one, the Eiffel Tower is almost 1,000 feet tall, 984 feet. And then when you get to the 31st one, it's over 3,000 feet tall. So little things done in progression can impact bigger things.
Yeah.
But you got to start somewhere. Now, what a lot of us want to do, we want to jump. We want to jump to here.
Yeah. Yep.
See? And even back here, we don't want to start small.
Yes.
We want some big splash, something big. Well, let's think about what you could do to make your church or your churches more effective. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. Focusing on the one thing means determining what you could do that will make the biggest difference. It's recognizing that not all things matter equally. And finding the thing or things that matter most. And begin doing them. But they become strategic. A lot of times what we do in churches, we let people come up with all kinds of good ideas. Most churches have more things to do than they can do. But what are the strategic things? What is the big thing that we can do that would make the biggest impact? And that's part of what I don't know that you'll discover it today, but it's a process you could lead your church leaders through. You could lead pastors. I mean, AMS people we got. And is it, okay. You do the right thing and then you do the next best right thing. And I'm gonna share a process with you today.
Just one quick
Yeah, sure.
I know frustration for me a lot of times is you talk about having so many things
Right.
to do.
Right.
A lot of times my frustration is that all those ideas most of the time come from looking backwards
Sure, that's right.
instead of looking
That's
forward.
exactly right. That's right.
And especially, say, for example, us, if we're kind of in one of those low seasons, the things that were really working great 5 years ago,
They don't
physically, we can't do it.
Yeah, they don't work. COVID changed all that. It forced us to be forward thinkers and not backward thinkers. And that's why it's so strange for people. Change is hard. Let's just think about it. Just put your hands together like you would naturally. Just put them together. For me, when I naturally put my hands together, my right thumb is over my left thumb. I don't know how you do it, but do it differently. Just put your left over your right.
No.
It feels weird. Or cross your arms. Now I got pictures of me when I'm a little boy. I'm standing there. Well, do it differently. Hug yourself differently. I can't even hug myself. You think about how little things try to change behavior, how awkward it feels, and it's just true in the church. when you try to bring about change, you know, that Rob said, I'm in mourning about Calipari. I'm a UK grad. My father went to UK, University of Kentucky. And I mean, when Calipari came, we had been in the gutter with Billy Gillespie. It was absolutely awful. Calipari came, rocketed out, won a national championship. And that's been it. He went to one and done deal, you know, get the future NBA players and win championships. Well, that's ended. The transfer portal changed it, COVID changed it, NIL changed it. Cal didn't change. And, you know, the fan base was they're glad for the most part. And mainly it's because Cal wouldn't change. He thought his model, and he'll have to change when he goes to Arkansas. But it's a typical example of what happens with us. You know, we think, Mark, that if we just get back, I tell churches that I do training in, I say if the 80s come back, we're ready. We are poised.
Yeah.
And some of them, it's the 70s.
50s.
Yeah, it could be. When I went to Zion Baptist in the fall of 1982, we started growing, started new classes, and we were cleaning out a storage room to start a new Sunday school class, and we found bulletins. This was in 1984, and we found bulletins from 1954 that Lifeway was Sunday school board put out. And I opened them up and had the same order of service in it, singing the same hymns. Same ladies playing, Isaiah Paris playing the organ, her sister Cornelia Ash was playing the piano. And the same guys taking up the offering, wearing the same clothes. Pretty much. That wasn't quite true, but it made a good point. And I held the bulletin up on Sunday morning. I said, folks, if you went to sleep in 1954 and woke up 1984, nothing has changed except the back of the head of the guy you've been looking at forever. Less hair. I said, maybe we ought to change some things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, you know, here's the deal. Don't go back and do something stupid. Don't go back and say, hey, that preacher, that guy from up there in Nashville said do this. And then next thing you know, you're calling Ken, hey, they fired me. I got to find some place to go. What'd you do? I did something stupid. And so we're going to talk today about how to keep you from doing something stupid. So part of it is you got to understand your purpose. You got to get back to the purpose of the church. It's not to make people happy. It's not to make them feel good. It's not to come talk about Alabama football.
Yeah.
I'm meddling. And now it's basketball.
Yeah, we actually talking about
I mean,
basketball.
God, Nate Oates, he's outstanding. I mean,
You ain't getting it.
I was rooting for him. But anyway, the Tower of Pisa started in the 1100s. I've been over there, and it's built on a marsh. And they started building it, and the bottom part, they got to this second. It was built to be a bell tower. There's a Catholic cathedral next door to it. It was built to be a bell tower, 7 bells, to ring different times to call them to prayer. And they built up to here, and they started leaning, so they waited a number of years, finally quit leaning, and they built the rest of it. Well, of course, that just accelerated the lean. And they kept leaning and leaning and leaning. It's 183 feet tall, and it's about 20 feet off center. Well, it kind of stabilized, but then in the 70s, it started tilting to where they thought it was going to topple over. And so some engineers in Italy came in and told them they could stop the lean, but they could also straighten it. They could put grout under it, put a foundation. And so the town of Pisa voted not to straighten it. Why?
See, thank you.
People weren't coming to pray. They were coming to see the Leaning Tower. It was a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
They lost their purpose. I want to submit to you, I want to suggest to you that some of our churches have become a tourist attraction.
That's right. Yeah.
We attract people through music and lights and smoke and dressing cool and doing all this stuff. But those people are not becoming followers of Jesus. Our baptisms continue to decline because we've bought into a lie. The lie is build it and they will come. And that's a lie. The truth is, introduce them to Jesus and he will change their life. What's the purpose of your church? You see, you got to be clear about it. We know ESPN is, sports, and Ford is vehicles, trucks, cars. Nicholas is a great golfer. Starbucks, bitter, expensive coffee. But what's the purpose of the church? See, maybe this is where you need to begin the strategy plans. If you were to ask the people in your church, what's the purpose of the church? What would their answer be? What do you think, Alden?
Those.
Exactly. In Kentucky, we hired the Varner Group to do a research project for us in the early 2000s. We interviewed 3,000 Kentucky Baptists. And this would have been true in Alabama or anywhere in the South. We asked a bunch of questions, but one of the questions was, what's the purpose of the church? The number one answer was fellowship. Now that's a byproduct, isn't it, of the church? We want good fellowship. Well, what is the purpose of the church? To carry out the Great Commission. Make disciples.
Yeah.
And that's not negotiable. You don't get to vote on that.
That's right.
This isn't up for, okay, let's vote on this. Well, it don't matter if you vote on it. The creator of the church has decreed what the purpose of the church is. Go and make disciples. That's right. Maybe you need to remind your church, here's why we're here. What's the purpose of the pastor? See, if you don't know what your purpose is, your church has a wonderful plan for your life.
That's wrong.
They want you to marry them, bury them, baptize them. I equipped deacons to visit the hospitals in Henderson, Evansville, Indiana. And one lady said, now, Brother Dan said, I know you got deacons that will visit us, but nobody can pray for me like you do. That's a lie. That's a lie we buy into. It's like, oh, yes. So I got to go. See, I believe that stuff. Church went from 150 to 250 just like that. Couldn't get past 300. I didn't know what to do, so I called in somebody from the state. I said, I want you to look at everything we're doing and try to help me understand what the problem is. And so he came, looked at everything, our decision making, blah, blah, blah. And after about 6 weeks, he called me and he said, Brother Dan, I'm ready to meet with you. So he drove to Henderson. We met at a restaurant and he said, I figured out what's the problem. So I got my pad out and I said, well, what is it? He said, it's youth. He said, you're a problem. And so he said, everything flows through you. You're in every committee meeting. You're involved in every decision. You're the funnel. He looked at me and said, what's your purpose? And I said, well, the Bible says I'm to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. He said, that's what you need to go do. You need to give this ministry away. So he helped me put together a leadership team. We changed the way we did stuff. Took a while. But my church knew it. My deacons knew it. I was just too hard-headed. Because I believed that I was the one that could pray for them the best. I went to a VBS meeting one time. I went to an association meeting one time, and I'll just say I was bragging. Hey, we had Bible school this week. I led 10 children to Christ. And this older pastor came to me after over, put his arm around me. He said, I'm celebrating with you that those boys and girls came to Christ. He said, but what if you had taught their parents to lead them to Jesus?
Try.
I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if they introduced them to Jesus, then they'll take the responsibility to help them follow Jesus. You're crippling that. It's not your job. It's your job to equip those parents and those teachers to lead boys and girls to Christ.
Good.
So I changed everything. You worked in Bible school, you had to know how to lead a child to Christ. I had a team of people that someone came to me and said, Susie, like to got questions about being a Christian. Would you talk to her? I said, well, I'll tell you what about I teach you to do it? Yeah. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a little track here. And if you want me in the room, I'll be glad. But the greatest joy you'll ever have is leading your child to change everything. And then, when I baptize them, I put the mom or dad or both in the baptistry. And when they were baptized, I'd baptize them, but I'd have the dad, if he was available, I'd have the dad there, and I'd lay the kid's head in the dad's hands.
Oh, yes.
And I said, now, I look at him and say, that's your responsibility to make sure they follow Jesus. I have everybody in the crowd that was related to them, Sunday school teacher, anybody else, stand. We're standing to help support them coming to Christ. What's your purpose? It's not to do everything. Now, I'm right about this, whether you agree with it or not.
You are right about it. But when it's either you do it or it doesn't get done,
I know.
what do you do?
I get it. Well, you gotta keep doing it, but you gotta try to find somebody else to do it with. It's like fishing.
I'm teaching 10 4 and 5 year olds on Wednesday nights right now.
Perfect.
That is not my gift,
Yeah. You shouldn't have to do that.
but it's
Somebody's got to do it.
somebody's got to do it and nobody's stepping up, and that's where I get stuck.
I agree.
know the principle. You're exactly right.
I agree.
But yet I find that if I don't do it, it doesn't get
It's
done.
called the pipeline. And you got to get people in the pipeline. And it's hard. But the deal is,
And we don't have a lack of people coming.
Yeah.
you got to like and
We
commitment.
got a lot of commitments.
Try.
And I don't know how to get them.
Church I'm in right now, they don't have enough workers in preschool and children. So one Sunday, I just brought all the preschoolers in. It was chaos. Scream, holler. I can preach over them.
Yeah.
And did. But at the end of that, I just said, do you all recognize why we need workers in the nursery and the 2 and 3 year old? I had 3 people that volunteered. Now, I hope they like preschool. The only good thing good about 3 is 4. 3-year-olds will drive you nuts.
Yeah.
But this is hard stuff. And particularly in churches that people are, the lack of commitment is less and less. It used to be 20% doing 80%, now it's about 12.
Yeah.
And somehow, I don't have any quick answers for you, but the purpose is still there. Are you the pastor?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
So part of strategy planning then is you teaching a group of people the purpose of the church and how the church is to function health-wise, healthy. That's to function in a New Testament manner. What I found as a transitional pastor, and I'm in my 15th one now, is most churches, most of the people in the church don't know how to do church biblically.
And
They know how they did it in the 80s or, when K-Day was. But you got to help. This is part of strategy planning is to teach them, a group of people. And to do that, David, Psalm 78 it's just so rich for me. I wish I would have run into this years ago, but David says, I will declare wise things, I will speak mysteries from the past, things we've heard and known that our fathers have passed down to us. We must not hide them from their children. We must tell the future generation the praises of the Lord, His might, the wonderful works He has performed. So that, verse 6 says, so that future generations, listen to this, children yet to be born might know. They were to rise and tell their children so that they might put their confidence in God and not forget God's works to keep His commandments. I don't know what you do with abortion. That baby is a person.
Yeah.
Future generation. Talk about, right? Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I don't understand that. I believe.
Yeah.
But then he goes on. Says that he goes on to say that he shepherded them. It says in verse 72. Actually, in verse 70 it says, he chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfold. Now listen. You called? What's your name?
Brad.
Brad? You called? How old are you?
31.
31. When did you realize God had His hand on you?
I was saved at 7, called ministry at 17.
17. Been doing it a while. So what are you? 30?
33.
33. Called?
Yes, sir.
Young. You're young. What, 30?
Okay.
God call you? Clear enough?
46, called it 15. I've been preaching since I was 16, and
I went to Southern Seminary in 1976. I was green, boy. I didn't know the Bible. I'd never read the Bible through my whole life. And I went to seminary, but I knew God had called me. And I got in a formations class with some other guys there at Southern Seminary that had come from Sanford and Georgetown in Kentucky, different, Baptist schools and all that. And we went around the room telling about our call. I couldn't believe how many people in the room were not clear.
Good.
I thought, I got upset. I thought, I'm leaving a career that I like, that I'm pretty good at the clear call of God. One guy said, well, the director of WMU just thought I was a good speaker. Thought I ought to go to seminary. I thought the director of the WMU is not God. Shouldn't. You see, part of this deal of transfer of change is being clear that you're called to do this.
You do it.
And listen, we don't have men doing this that aren't called to God. He said he called him from the sheepfold. Well, you know what? If he took him from the sheepfold, I love Jeff Orch. I had him at things we did at Lifeway. I was over the state convention relationships for several years. We had him come to Ridgecrest a few years ago, and one of the most humble, godly men I've ever met. In fact, I'll tell you this: he was the most humble president of a seminary that I've ever met. Most of them are arrogant.
Sure.
They think they're smarter than everybody. Well, they probably are. They're not smarter than God, though.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty smart myself. But it ain't about smarts, it's about call.
Yeah.
But he made a statement, if from this passage, that God calls you, you're going to have the stink of sheep on you.
What? True.
When Ben Mandrell became the new president of Lifeway, I left right as he came. I knew change was coming, and I became a free will Baptist. I got to leave Lifeway of my own free will. There was a lot of people that didn't. But I met with him, and he said, Dan, tell me what you think. Just give me some wisdom. I said, well, don't ever lose the stink of the church. Because church people stink.
Good.
I heard my first youth ministry when I was at he did youth and education at Zion. He came up from Southwestern. He was a really good guy, but once he got there, I figured out he didn't like youth. Well, that's not going to work, you know. But one Sunday morning, he'd been there a few months. I was walking down the hallway Sunday morning checking on people, and we went down the preschool wing, and there was a big pile of, I don't know what y'all call it in Alabama, but Kentucky, we call it puke. There's a big old pile of puke. And as this guy was walking from the other end, I said to him, go get a bucket and a mop, and we got to clean the puke up. And he looked at me and said, I don't do puke. And I said, well, I do puke. And you're going to do puke. He got mad. Anyway, we cleaned it up. So the next morning, staff meeting was me and him, you know. And I said, you didn't like cleaning up that mess, did you? He said, no. I said, well, that's a metaphor for you. He said, what do you mean? I said, the rest of your ministry, people are going to be throwing up on you.
That's right.
And if you don't like it, you ought to do something else. He decided to go into banking.
Yeah.
No kidding. Ministry is messy.
Yeah.
Messier now than it's ever been. Yesterday morning, I had a guy, 43 years old, walk down the aisle, Horse Cave Baptist Church, uncontrollably crying. Finally got him calmed down enough to tell me that his wife had left him, taking her 2 kids. And I said, why? He said, I've been abusive. I said, have you hit her? No. I said, well, then I'll talk to you. I said, if you hit her, I'll probably hit you back. But anyway, he said, no, I've been verbally and so, I mean, he started spilling his guts. And it was ugly. Alcohol, anger. Church is messy. If you're called, you got to have a stink of the church on you. I worry about your generation, your all's generation. I worry about these guys who want to sit in an office and stick their nose in a book and exegete a passage and know more about what pluperfect means or aorist. But they don't know how to exegete their own church or their own culture.
Wow.
If you don't like people, go do something else. Ministry is about people. He called him from the sheepfold. But then he says, he brought him from tending ewes and to be shepherd over his people, Jacob over Israel, his heritage. And then he said, he shepherded them with a pure heart and guided them with skillful hands. Pure heart. I don't watch R-rated movies. I can't even hardly watch PG-13 anymore. Why? Because I'm holy? No. Life is R-rated enough. I don't want to pay to be offended.
That's it.
I want to be the real deal, don't you?
Amen.
I want to have clean hands. Who can ascend to the house of the Lord? Those that have clean hands and true. He shepherded them with a pure heart and skillful hands. And so part of this today is skillful hands. Y'all ready to take a break?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Just when you're talking about asking calls to ministry, over the years, I guess you remember back when I was growing up as a teenager that during invitation time, you almost always heard the pastor say, does anybody feel a call to ministry? And I think over the years, we don't even do that anymore. And I'm wondering, just listening, if maybe the reason, and I'm good out, do it all the time, but I'm just saying maybe the reason we don't do it is because of all the hurt maybe that we've gone through as pastors, and maybe subconsciously we're saying there's I don't want anybody else to go through this, or maybe we go the arrogant way and say, well, we're the only ones that are good enough to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just curious what your take is on that.
I do think the lack of discipleship training. I think the lack of boys and girls that are educated. I think it's just a lack of emphasis. The majority of people that were called to ministry in before the turn of the century came from small churches. The emphasis in the convention has been on big churches.
Yes, I agree.
And the deal is, a guy that comes from a church running 500 or more, and some of them 3,000 or 4,000, don't know how to relate to a church of 75.
Yeah.
And they feel like it's beneath them. There are still people called to ministry. They're just not willing to go serve where the sheep are.
Mm-hmm.
They want to go either start a church. And the deal about starting a church, if you can't lead a traditional church, you're not going to be any good at starting a church, because within 3 years it'll be traditional.
That's right.
So I think you're right. We haven't called out the call. But I also think there's an underlying arrogance here of elitism. I think Reformed theology has screwed all that up. That there's this elect, and people go, oh my gosh, well, I must have to have, some neon sign in the sky. Well, as you begin to develop youth leaders, have them youth Sunday, and have them lead in Bible school and give them responsibility. God begins to work in their heart, begins to, massage that. He's the one that calls them, but we have to give the opportunities. I think you're exactly right. It's a burden to me, because I'm telling you, in Kentucky, where I'm trying right now in a church to find pastors, and used to be you'd get 20 resumes, and now I'm going to give this church 5 names, and they're the only ones that are willing to talk to this size church in a county, basically a rural county. And so you're dead on, man. And it's part of our responsibility to raise up people who feel called to different kinds of ministry. It's not all called to preach, But one of the phenomena that's happening, and I think it's a healthy thing to a point, is that a lot of churches are calling people from within the church to serve within the church. So they're not going the route of seminary. So we'll talk a little more about that. Let's take a break. This is what they'll tell the new pastor. We want you to find a bold, innovative way to do exactly what we've been doing the last 25 years. As long as we don't change anything. Hartford, Kentucky is in what's called Ohio County, and this is a little town of 2,000 people. But this is helping define current reality. 2,000 happy people and a few sore heads. Every church has got some few sore heads. This is a young men's Bible study class. Right outside of Dallas. This guy came to a training I did at Lifeway, and we were talking about defining current reality. And these guys, you had to have fought in the Second World War. When they came back in 1944, they started a young men's Bible study class, and there was like 30 of them. Well, they've died off. Well, this was a new pastor, and he was updating the Sunday school, and he went to them and said, look, why don't we just call you all the men's Bible study class? They said, no, we've been the young men's Bible study class since 1944, and we ain't changing. I found out that this was the teacher. You can see he's got the cordelier, and this guy was almost 100. He's dead, and this guy's dead, but they're still the young men's Bible study class. So part of leading change then is following a process or stages. I've given you a handout, and I know some of you it's helpful to have a summary of a book, okay? So we've given you a handout that's a summary of Cotter's book, Leading Change. It's called The Pastor Leading Change. Cotter comes to church. And so we've taken this book and immersed it in the church, but we've given you an overview of the 8 stages. I'm only going to talk really today about 3 of them, but I want you to be aware of them. This is a fairly easy read. It's not real technical, but it's very good. It was written in the 90s, but it was updated in 2000 something. John Cotter is an authority on leading change. And one of the things he says is that you can't get in a hurry with change. It takes time. And some of us are in a big hurry. When I went to Pastor Zion Baptist in 1982, the interim there, he was 80-something years old. His name was E. Keevil Judy. You can't make his stuff up. His middle name was Keevil, but they called him E.K. Praise God. But anyway, I went to him. I was 31. I said, Brother Judy, just pretend I'm your grandson. What advice would you give me about leading this church? He looked at me and said, I can tell you're in a hurry. He said, you need to take your time, get to know the people, get to know the culture. The last guy did not get to know the culture, and he lasted 18 months. He said, you know anything about farming? I said, I'm for it. But I did not. These are big farmers, 5,000 acres. They, double crop, all that stuff, no till. I had no idea about that. He said, if you'll take 2 years just to get to know the people before you make any radical changes, he said, you will do well. And I found that. I started visiting these people and asking them. This church was founded in 1853. There were 5 families that started it, and they were all still had family members there. And so I heard the stories. So anyway, it's transformation and change is a process. It's not an event. And you can't decree it, generally. If you try to decree it, they're not going to do it. So his advice in the book is to see process in stages and, epochs even, you could say. It's a step forward in a journey. And change then, leading change, you need to do it in a sequential way. One step builds on the other. And that's why I said in the domino thing, you can't just jump to the big thing right off. Don't try and rush the process. So his first principle then is in leading change is to establish a sense of urgency. That's got to happen in you. Now, it may take a while to figure it out, what the urgency is. But if you're not baptizing people and there's 85% of your community around you is lost, there ought to be a sense of urgency. So without discontent, the present situation, there will be no planned, internally motivated directional change. And failure to establish a sense of urgency is the first error that leaders make. You got to see it before they see it. Do you see the arrow? Most of you probably do. I've given you the cheat sheet. But once you see it, you just cannot not see it. But your people don't see the need for change. If they do, they don't know how to articulate it.
I've never seen it.
Or they don't want to do it.
No, I've never seen it.
Yeah. There is the arrow. And once you see it, you cannot not see it. But you got to see it before they're going to see it. That's a gift. I believe God gives vision to pastors, not to committees.
I mean,
In the Bible, you don't get a whole bunch of people together and they get this great vision. He gave vision to Moses. He gave vision to Abraham. He gave vision to Ezekiel. So, this is a real church. This church I served 2 years ago. They were founded in 1990. And you can tell from their first few years, they were killing it. And then they weren't. And so when I came in 2022. And actually, I think I came in 21. But I came right here. And they'd been through, the last pastor had left under fire, and they'd had a parade of pastors. And so the first thing I did was I like numbers. I'm an engineer. I like numbers. I think facts are our friends. So I just had them chart. I had a guy in the church that was good at that. Took the worship attendance and charted it from the beginning of the church. So just as a glance, what would you say? What would be your comment if you just looked at that?
Well, they're declining.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They, almost all these bumps were pastor changes.
Yeah.
Almost everyone. Almost everyone. And of course here, you know, they had a big blow up right here. And they went from 204 to 140. And then COVID hit and they went to 75. And when I put this up on the screen one Sunday morning, they gasped. There'd been a few people that were there at the beginning when the church started, but there'd been some other people coming. They'd forgotten. So that began to create a sense of urgency. Part of your job, well, let's get to denial. I'll get the other one. Another book that I would strongly encourage you to read, but I've given you a summary of it, okay? Understanding the Church's Capacity for Denial is another handout, okay? So I don't know if you've ever read Tidlow. Anybody ever read Richard Tidlow? It's a business book, but he also talks in here about the church. He talks about how hard it is for people to change. He talks about Henry Ford. They only had black cars. And General Motors was making all kinds of colored, different colors, multiple colors. And his people were trying to get him to change, and he said, well, I don't think there's need for change. And they said, well, go look out the window.
Okay.
And there was lots of different cars in this parking lot, and they were different. They weren't black. Sometimes you got to look out the window. Myself, Brett Selby does transitional work in Oklahoma. Rusty Ellison's a friend of mine in Kentucky, has done probably 10 transitional pastors. Henry Webb, he and I will be doing this in a couple of weeks here. But this is our quote. No organization under heaven has the greater capacity to look at facts in the face and deny reality than the local church. Why business leaders fail to look facts in the face and what to do about it. So denial then is the unconscious calculus that if an unpleasant reality was true, it would be too terrible and therefore it cannot be true. It is, in George Orwell's blunt formation, protective stupidity. I want to tell you, a lot of churches are in protective stupidity. They want to deny the need to change. Why is there denial? Well, it basically says because we're human. The impulse is to avoid painful truth. Just look at the impulse to avoid pain itself. My dad died in 2012. My dad struggled with weight most of his life. And he had back trouble most of his adult life. Had 4 back surgeries. And I don't want to offend anybody, but the doctor told my dad his back problem came from his front. Mm-hmm. He was way overweight. When my dad got sick in the fall of 2011 and nearly died, he lost 100 pounds. His back quit hurting. Now, I never said to my dad, I told you so. But he finally said one day, he said, oh, I think my back was from my front. I thought, well, I heard that before. We have a tendency to deny reality, don't we? So, he says in the book, the organism that was intended by Jesus himself to be the most fluid on earth has become quite the opposite, so entrenched in its structure and habit of the way we do things that there's little, if any, fluidity. Sustaining the present and even the past has become the overarching force of most churches. When protection and preservation become the guiding concerns, the church is in trouble. And so it's our job to help alter that. And so upon deciding to engage in strategic planning, one of the first determines a pastor must do is, where's the church today? What is current reality? When dealing with denial or current reality by a congregation, the pastor should be well prepared to help the congregation see what they have not ever seen before, even though it might be before their very eyes. So, the first stage, the first big step then, beyond, we're going to get back to just establishing a sense of urgency by defining reality. But to do that, you can't do it by yourself. The mistake so many pastors make is they see it, they declare it, and think it's going to get done. And the truth is, if the people don't see it, they'll never do it. So you got to build a guiding coalition. Call it what you want, vision team, planning team, whatever. But you need 12 to 20 people. More than 20 gets the unyielding. I've done it with more than 20. It's not healthy, I don't think. It's not as manageable. Most churches, 12 to 20. The church I'm in right now, we run about 130. When I went there, they were running 70, but we had 20 people on our vision team, our transition team. So you gotta build a guiding coalition. You got to get the right people who are influencers and leaders involved in ministries and are process thinkers. So I've given you a handout. It's called Developing a Guiding Coalition. Okay? And this is one that you'll want to digest a bit. Tells you can call it whatever you want to call it. I've just said a vision team, but that they're engaged in ministry, main conduit, meet together once a month. They review material sent prior to the monthly meetings. They listen to and learn from the congregation. They're advocates, personally committed to pray and faithfully participate. So you got to put a team together. When I went to Horse Cave Baptist Church, I met with the deacons and the pastor. That was in July. He wasn't leaving till the end of August. And I told him, if I come here, we need to have 15 to 20 people to help lead this change process. And they all looked at me and said, we don't have 15 or 20 people to do it. And I said, well, then I'm not going to come. Good. I said, you all go back and talk about it and come up with a list of 20 people, and maybe 15 of them will say yes. But until you do that, I'm not going to come as your transitional pastor, because there's no point. I can't do this by myself. Mm-hmm. And so they called me back in August and said, well, we've got a list. And I said, okay. And I said, well, let's wait till October. If you got a list, I said, let me get there and kind of feel the lay of the land. But anyway, long story short, they after I was there in September, they asked these 20 people, hoping to get 15, and all 20 of them said yes. And they have led this process, not me. I'd tell them, I'm not going to tell you what to do. If I tell you what to do, you won't do it. Or you'll only do it as long as I'm there. And I didn't come to stay, I came to leave. Well, Pastor, it's true. Most of us aren't going to be there for years. We're going to, we need to equip them to do the work of ministry. So it's to getting the right people. So the first step, other than having a sense of urgency yourself, if you don't have a sense of urgency, your church needs to change, then don't do this. Maybe God's got some other place for you. But once you do that, you need to build a coalition, a guiding coalition. And without it, nothing's going to happen. So think about who are the 12 to 20? 12 is on the low side. 20 is, it's worked well. I've done this, and not just as a transitional pastor. I did consulting for Lifeway for 5 years full time. Big churches, I did this very same process that we were talking about to help a church define reality. So any questions about the vision team? Anybody?
Do you talk about this publicly?
Yes. No, I talk about it publicly.
Identify the members?
Absolutely. I just tell them, hey, here's what we need. We need people that will commit to this team, and here's the commitment. Meet monthly. You got to be willing, and then you can sign up. And we sent out a thing, and so it padded their list a little bit, and then.
So the church knows.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, you wanted to know. Oh, absolutely. We're going to lead a vision team. We're going to think about what could happen in the next 12 to 18 months. Don't tell them 3 to 5 years. You can't plan 3 to 5 years. The world's changing too fast.
But they,
Yeah, go ahead.
what do you do if you have somebody that will sign up, but it's not necessarily somebody that's forward thinking?
Just tell them just because you sign up doesn't mean you're going to be on the team. I mean, seriously. You just tell them, hey, we only need 12 to 20, and we're going to put people that are in ministries, and there's going to be some specific slots we're going to have to fill just because you sign up. And I had people sign up and that we knew, no way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the deal was they didn't think they'd have anybody sign up. Yeah. And so you got to be wise about that. The right people. That is the absolute key. Get the right people. And if you get the right people, then God will, He will empower them. He'll speak to them. Because you're going to do a collaborative process where they're going to discover what the needs are. You're going to lead them to see what you hopefully have already at least got a glimpse of.
Steve and I work in church revitalization with our C churches, and sometimes you don't have 20 people in
Sure.
the church.
Sure.
Do you have a ratio that you kind of...
I've done it with a church of 30 and had half the church involved in it. I had 15. They told me they couldn't do it. I said, well, you got 30 people coming? Almost all adults. And I said, let's just use everybody.
Okay.
Tell them everybody can come. Well, only 15 showed up. Well, it was perfect.
Yeah.
And they, it was the church. The rest of them were kids and, people too old to get out. But if they'll have 12 people, you could do it with 10. I've done it with 8. It's not as dynamic. But I've done this with really small churches. I've done with churches that run 3,000 or 4,000. But
Most of our churches are under 50.
absolutely. Well, that's true in Kentucky. Church 75 was big. That's the average size church in Kentucky. It's probably true in Alabama, I would guess. About right? 75? No?
Tablet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's close.
Yeah.
But they kind of have what? Older youth.
Oh, absolutely. Older you. I had a 16-year-old. I had a 20-year-old in college. Sharp. They pushed us about technology and about more relevant worship. They pushed us. And they were the kids and the grandkids and the nieces and nephews. And, they said it. Yeah, it was, they were like E.F. Hutton. They heard it, And this one girl was 16. She impacted a family that is really sour, but she's not. They haven't got to her yet. So, I think she's going to break the cycle. I really do. So, you got to develop this guiding coalition, and then this group then is going to create a vision or a path. It doesn't have to necessarily be a vision. But it's a path for change. That's what you're looking for. It's a pathway. But you want them to do it. You don't do it for them. And don't bring somebody in from the state convention to do it. Now you can bring somebody in to help you as a catalyst to get the process started. But you want these people to do the work. And if they don't do it, you're crippling them. You're doing it for them. They would come to me, what do you think we ought to do? I ain't telling you. What you see to do. So First Baptist Hendersonville, where I'm a member, they run 3,000 or 4,000. But they've got a great vision statement. that helps them define current reality, connecting every generation to God, to others, and service. So they take every year, they take their vision statement, and it's their mission statement, and they analyze their church. How are we doing connecting every generation to God? Are we multi-generational? And we are, but they realized they were missing 5th and 6th grade boys. Huge gap. And so they had to do some changes, you see. So sometimes your vision, if it's clear and simple, can be your barometer, or how you continually assess current reality. But you don't have to have one as but please, your mission statement can't be love God, love people. Well, how do you measure that? That's a slogan. That's not vision. Love God, love people. Well, how do you know you've done that? So anyway, they want people to come on Sunday, connect groups, Bible study, who want to serve. So, out of this process, you may get some clarity about the big things, the big buckets you want to fill. But to do that, you've got to define reality. I don't know if you've ever read Leadership as an Art. Max Dupree is a great leadership thinker. But he says the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. The last is to say thank you. Yesterday, what is the day? Tuesday? Sunday, the lady plays the piano. She's also on our search team. She is so gifted, but she's very humble. So I walked up to her and I said, Belinda, I just want to thank you for what you played today. It was outstanding. And tears started coming down her face. She said, well, I screwed up a couple of notes. I said, well, I didn't know it. I said, your spirit is such a blessing to this church. The people that take up the offering, the people that clean the stuff out of the pews, it's amazing how going to people and saying, thank you, appreciate you. Just want to know I appreciate you. Writing notes. Pastor Bruce Chester, some of you know who Bruce Chester is. He's pastor of First Baptist Hendersonville. He's an Alabama boy. And here's what he does. He writes, now listen to this. He writes over 100 personal notes every week. To the workers, to staff. We have training there 2 or 3 times a year. It's part of this calling thing. We're finding that these young guys, a lot of the guys are called to ministry. They haven't got any theological or practical training. So we offer it. It's called Church Ministry Essentials, and it doesn't cost anything. You get there, we provide motel, meals. It starts on Monday at 1 o'clock. We end Wednesday at 11. Anybody here been there? Love to have you come. We're doing the end of August, and it's practical, nuts and bolts stuff. Some of the best training. Myself, Bruce Chesler, and Bruce Raley, we lead it. Anyway, he writes all those people personal notes. He writes me a personal note. My wife's been ill. She's had MRSA infection in her foot and had to go in the hospital and have surgery. He's written me notes. It's incredible. Not an email. It's not a text. It's a handwritten note. You'd be surprised what kind of capital you would get just writing people or just walking up to them. Mark, thank you. Thanks for serving, man. Appreciate you. I mean, is anybody here too encouraged? You're overdosed? Most of us are. On Sunday morning, somebody can leave, 100 people can leave and say, I love that sermon. One person said, that sucked today. And that's what we remember all week.
Yeah.
Well, what did I do that sucked? That's what you worry about. Yeah. Encouragement. And then in between, the leader is a servant. How can I serve you? Jesus said, I came not to be served, but to what? Serve. And give my life a ransom for many. Serving others. That's what this is about.
I had a pastor that I grew up under, Charles Mark,
in Alabama. I've heard of Brother Charles, but he would write notes.
Yep.
And when I was playing ball growing up as a kid, he would read the newspaper, and if he saw that I'd had a good ball game, he would write me a little note and congratulate me on the game. He was unprovoked. There was no reason.
Sure.
Had been in the hospital. Had been
Sure,
sick.
sure. That's right.
You know, didn't win some big award in school. Just him staying connected to his congregation, and that's back when Parker Memorial and Evanston ran about 1,000 in attendance.
Sure.
And instead of walking up to him as a young man and shaking his hand, it was always a hug. You know, he was just that kind of a good gentleman. And
Well, that's this team that you're going to put together is a team that you want to continually thank. Thank you for serving. No, I know you got other things you can do, but this is so important. This is so vital. And then as you discover things, you want to highlight. You want them to share it, not you. You don't get up on Sunday morning and share it. You get them to, get some of the, whatever. So to lead the process to define current reality, you're going to form two groups. So look at your vision, developing a guiding coalition, okay? Look at the bottom. This is a suggestion. Now you can do it. You do it any way you want to. This is how I do it. And I've done it over 50 times. Develop one of the teams is around who you are. You're gonna. I've gotten crass sometimes, and I get in the flesh a little bit. But I just say we're going to give the church a complete physical. And one of the times I said, including the glove. And you men understand that. I've had some people look, well, what does he mean? I said, well, I shouldn't have said that, But you're gonna look at how we do things around here, how you make decisions, how you're organized, what your Constitution bylaws look like, how's your Sunday school organized, how are you, all of that. And then I'm going to give you some specific things, okay? I've got another handout in there to give you some specific. In the second group, you're going to look at where you are. I think this is true in Alabama. Ken, you can correct me or you can verify this. Most communities, 85% of the community in which you're located don't go to church anyway. 85% are unchurched. Is that true in Alabama? It's true in Kentucky. And so most of us don't see them. We don't see those people. We see them, but they're invisible. Even sometimes when guests come to church, they're invisible. We had two couples visited Sunday. They've been there 3 weeks. And so I asked the chairman of deacons, who are these people? I don't know. I said, why don't you know? Why don't you? And so I got to them before church was over, and they lived 2 blocks down the street, and nobody knew their names. Yes. Hello. People they're invisible to us. And we're friendly to people that we know and probably like. So this is getting them to see the people. What town you in? Camden? Camden. What's the population?
2,000, a little over 1,200.
Churches running?
140.
Yeah. And so is 2,000 about 3 miles?
Like that.
So within 3 miles of your church, you got 2,000 people, and 80% of them probably 15, 16. Yeah, well, let's just say 12 to 1,500 of them don't go to church anywhere. They're not Methodists. They're not backslidden Baptists. They just don't go to church anywhere. The fields are wide unto harvest. We're sending missionaries to countries that are more highly churched than some of our cities are. The world is coming to America. So, who you are. Now, there's a handout in here. It's called Church Culture. You see this? Right here. Church culture. You found it yet? There it is. Yeah, everybody got it? These are suggested questions. You don't have to use all of them. We're going to send you this electronically so you can, you can use whatever you want, add to it, whatever. But these are some good questions that I have used over the years that will help your church begin to define its current reality. Now, this is hard work. So you want to divide your team up. Let's just say you got 20 people. Okay, it's easy numbers. You got 10 people that's going to work on your church culture team. You may want to assign 2 or 3 of them to look at the administrative part. How are we doing administratively? And they're looking at bylaws and all that stuff. Do we have current job descriptions? Do we have security measures in place? How are we handling preschoolers and the people that work? Are we doing security? All that kind of stuff. You're going to look at your administrative piece. Okay. You're going to start looking at how many people are involved. What is our statement of faith, and what does our church stand for? What's our church known for in the community? If I ask, what if I was to go down to the local gas station and ask them, what do you know about Horse Cave Baptist Church? What would they say? So they did that. And the lady said, where is it?
Yeah.
It's right in the middle of town. It's not a big town. There's 1,500 people in Horse Cave. And the lady that worked at the gas station down there said, well, where's the church? Well, you drive by it every day. What are our strategies for equipping members to fulfill the Great Commission? What are our outreach strategies? You can read all this. What percent of our budget is designated for missions and ministry? So you may want to have another team that looks at the finances. See, how are we doing financially? How's that looking? And then you want to have another team that's looking at your discipleship piece. What percentage of our weekly attendance is in a small group? Blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So you're giving yourself. The church is going to give itself a complete physical. You may have stuff you want to add to this. But this is a guide for you to begin to define current reality of who we are as a church. Okay? And then with this group then, you meet, that vision team, whatever you want to call it, meets every month. And here's the commitment on the front end. If you can't come to the meetings, don't agree to serve. And we lay the meetings out for 6 months. Here's when we're going to meet, over 6 months. And we didn't have 100%, but we probably only, out of 20 people, we only would have 2 missing, maybe 3. But they told why. There was a high level of commitment. Meet every month, and every month then, that team reports what they've found. Okay, here's our report. And if you have multiple teams in your church culture, let's say you have three teams. You got 10 people. Yeah, you may want to end up with 3 teams. Each one of them, then here's what we're discovering, and they hand it out to everybody on the team. Everybody gets a copy of that. So your meetings then consist of reporting. Okay. There's accountability. Are y'all getting this? Yeah. So you meet every month. This process takes about 4 months. Let's just say you started right now. If you had your team together, you're looking at August. Summer, you have to give yourself a little cushion. I started it in October. We ended in February. Okay? It took us about 4 or 5 months. You can't microwave this. All right? Questions about the church culture piece.
Well, that what you just talked about, meeting, the
Right.
the meeting. Actually, I was listening, but I was thinking.
Everybody meets.
Everybody meets.
Everybody meets.
But everybody reports in their group
They report to the entire group
every month.
every month. They get up and say, here's what we've discovered.
And you give them the assignment
Oh, absolutely. Well, each team has
and the set
they are assigned, and you need to get this done. Usually I give them 2 months to do it.
This stuff.
The next meeting, we need to hear your update.
Yeah.
I wanted everything done by December. I started in October. I want all the information by December. So they did all of October, all of November, and we met the middle of December. And they had all the information. And whether or not I do it as a transitional pastor, or whether I did it as a consultant, or if I've just gone into church and led them through a process of strategy planning, I usually try to, my hand is in their back a bit. I give them deadlines. If you don't give them a deadline, they won't do it.
That's right.
So we need to be done by the middle of December. So, any question about culture? But we're going to talk about context, okay? Now, you're going to be given. Here's you assign questions, share the information in each meeting, share insights gained. This will begin to help them see the need for change. Now, if they aren't getting it, you may have to exegete it a bit. You may have to say, no, let's make sure we understand this. We don't have anybody working with mission friends on Wednesday nights except the pastor and his wife. Did y'all know that? And some of this has to be undergirded. Oh, another thing I didn't put in here is that then everybody on the vision team, the 20 people or so, they recruit prayer partners. Every one of them. At least 1, 2, or 3. We want to have somebody praying for you in the process. So we've gone from 20 to 40 or 50 people. They're praying for them. See? You ask them to be praying for our meetings, praying, you're asking God to give us insight. You're asking God to open their eyes. Lord, open their eyes and help them see. Okay? So you're looking at, you're taking a good hard look at themselves. And this is part of the process. So you may have to give some guidance to. Well, let's make sure we look at this. And you've seen some of it, but you don't want to tell them what they need to see. They need to see it for themselves. And then you're going to get into context, okay? So the context has to do with some internal things, but we're also talking about our external things. How much land you have, how much parking you have, how much Bible study capacity you have, how much worship capacity you have. Now, those are just numbers. But there's a book in the Bible called Numbers. Hey, listen, if they counted the number of fish in John chapter 21, I don't think there's anything wrong with counting people. 153 fish. Most fishermen lie. This is the inspired and inerrant Word of God. I mean, they told how many. They didn't tell how big they were. Now, the line is how long arms you got, but how big a fish is. But you're going to look at, I had a church, and I was doing consulting, and I had a church outside of Jacksonville, Florida, that called me wanting to build an education building. I'd never been to their site. I pulled them up on Google Earth. I said, where are you wanting to put your education building? He told me where he's going to put it. And I counted, I said, how many parking places do you have in your facility? He said, I don't know. I said, you got 38. He said, how do you know that? I said, I'm looking at Google Earth. I said, you drive a red pickup truck? He went, I do. I said, you wearing a plaid shirt? I am. I'm inside. How do you know that? I said, I was just a lucky guess, man. I scared him to death. Thought I was the NSA. I said, if you put that building there, you're going to lose 15 parking places. Where are you going to put them? I said, there's about 1.7 persons per car. I haven't met the 0.7 anywhere, but that's the average. And I said, you know, and so anyway, if you're going to define reality, this church I'm working with right now, their sanctuary will hold about 250 people comfortably. They've got enough parking places for about 200 people, and they got enough Bible study space for about 175. Well, that's balanced. See, that's a good balance. What's their top end? 200. Well, they ran 200 12 years ago, and they've declined ever since. Well, they peaked out. But they didn't add land, they didn't add parking, they didn't, you know, but they've just slowly declined. And of course, COVID, you know, in Kentucky, we call it the COVID. It's called the COVID. People have had the COVID, you know. Well, yeah, they died from the COVID. Yeah, well, we're all related, you know. I mean, you know, in Kentucky and Alabama, you can marry your cousin, and sometimes you can marry your sister. I don't know, you know. But anyway, you're gonna look at this, and so here's what I've done for you guys. That I did this for associational missionaries years ago. We're going to send you this. Okay. This is a live Excel document, not on the PowerPoint. But let me jump out of PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you this document here that's live. And all you got to do is change. Let me get air back. Come on, get off there. It's called 5 counts and 5 containers and 5 characteristics. What happened there? Where did that go? Why is that not showing up there? That's my wife and where did that go? Why is that not showing? Does anybody know that? So those numbers at the top, the one that's current, I update this every year. So it's through 2023, I think. Because 24, we don't have the numbers. But you can put your numbers, your average worship attendance for the last 5 years. Now, I'm giving you a gift here. And if you don't know how to use Excel, there's people in your church smarter than you, so they'll figure it out. Get some of these young people, or there's a lot of people that older than me that know how to do this. I don't know how to do it. I got people that do. But you can put, if you got more than one worship hour, you can put that on there. Put your average Bible study attendance. If you got another hour, you put it on there. How many young adults? Why is that important to know? It just gives you an indication of how old your church is. How many baptisms you've had the last 5 years, what other additions you've had, how many preschoolers, how many children, how many youth, and then it automatically calculates the number of adults that you have. And then you have 5 containers. How many usable parking places? Most of you don't have 300. You probably got 40 or 50. But how many? How many will your worship center sit? Now we put down here 24 inches per person. Don't do something stupid. Don't take a measuring stick and start measuring people's butts. And that's when the fight broke out. You know? I suggest you use 36 inches. Because people come, they put their coat down, they put their Bible down. Don't tell the architect. The architect, they say 18 inches. Well, I don't know anybody's got an 18-inch butt. Hello. But anyway. Yeah, don't do that. No, it's not realistic. Now you think about that. And COVID made it 36 because people now, they want space. And so take whatever he gave you and you just measure, you know how to do that. And so, but how many can you actually seat and then look about 80% of that? If it'll handle 300, then you got about 240. And actually, they're saying today it's about 70%. What's the space for preschoolers? 1 hour. Why is that? You can't use preschool space twice. They're going to be in there both. If you put them in Sunday school, they'll probably stay there for worship. And then, how many children? How many acres do you have? What's your undesignated receipts? Okay? I'm helping you here. And then what it gives you then, it gives you a executive report. It'll make you look smart. Make you look like you know what you're doing. Worship, Bible study, site considerations, financial targets, how much money you could probably raise, how much mortgage you could have, evangelism, what you've been doing the last 5 years. This is a piece then that you want have your church context people do. Okay? Your second team of defining reality. And, usually it's kind of a mixed bag, good and bad. One of the things I ask them to look at is let's look at the preschool space. And if we have a guest family coming with preschoolers, number one, can they find it? And once they find it, do they want to put their kid in it? Ours is bad. And one of their things that they're hoping to do in the future is relocate the preschool and children's area to a more easily accessible space that's secure. Well, I knew that, but they didn't. And so that came out of this context piece. Okay? So you want to look at, if we go backwards here, you're going to look at these site considerations. That's what you're looking at. Some of this, okay? You're helping define reality. And then it'll give you a trend. It'll give you the last 5 years. The bottom line is Sunday school. The top line is worship. And those ought to mirror each other. Your church is in trouble if your Bible study is flat and your worship's doing this. And that's true with a lot of churches. Sometimes the Bible study is doing this, the worship's doing this. Sometimes they're both doing this. But it helps them to see reality. Okay? So we're sending you this. Elizabeth is sending you this Excel spreadsheet and a live document. When you leave today, she's going to email you the Excel spreadsheet that says current reality. It used to be on the website Lifeway. When I left, they took it off. I took it with me. You'd be welcome to put it on a website and just put Alabama Baptist. I don't own it. You could do it for your association. Anybody can use it. Just don't go in and change the numbers. Don't change the formulas. If you do, it'll screw it up. So all you got to do is put the numbers in, it automatically gives you a report. So they come in and give an overview of here's what we've learned. That's part of the piece of the puzzle of the church context.
So your context group would have access.
That's it. You'd want them to have access. And usually somebody in the church knows how to manipulate an Excel spreadsheet. So you want to make sure that that's what somebody does that. And then they have to dig out the numbers. What are usually on ACP, but then acreage and all that kind of stuff, The other piece that I suggest in this is the looking at the condition of your facilities. If you've been there longer than 3 years, you can't see what needs to change. You're blind to it. Their soffits are rotten. There's all kinds. They don't have lighting in the parking lot. But they're looking at all that. And that's what this context team does. Well, let's look at our facilities. There's a maintenance we need to do, deferred maintenance. What about our air handlers? How old are they? Are we looking at in 10 years having to replace 3 or 4 air handlers? Whatever it is. You're looking at you're getting a good dose of reality. Okay? And it isn't fluff. This is real stuff. You're looking at trends, capacities, acreage, all that kind of stuff. It helps them see the need to define reality. And then you're going to ask Ken and others, or the association guys, to give you the demographics around your church. You're going to do a 1 mile, a 3 mile, a 5 mile. Now, most people are not going to drive more than 5 miles to come to church. 7 is about the extent of it. But if you look at 5 miles, then you're going to get 80-90% of the people that are attending your church. There'll be some outliers here and there and all that, but you want to begin to look at stuff. Now, this is a real church in Bowling Green, Kentucky that I served as a consultant to help them do strategy planning. Here's a church that within 5 miles, there's over 49,000 people. You probably don't know anything about Bowling Green. This is I-65, and this is the main drag of what's called Scottsville Road, and that's where all the growth is coming in Bowling Green. This church was founded back in the 50s, 1953, I think. And when I started working with them, they had 12 people. And they were trying to decide whether they were going to live or die. Well, they ended up being taken over by a big church in Bowling Green called Living Hope Baptist Church. But they couldn't decide. They had this nice facility right on Scottsville Road, and they were running 12 people. And they were all old. Nobody under 60 was in the building. Well, I just showed them the demographics. And all they had to do was look out the window. Because, well, let's see what this next one is. Here's some of the population. I'm not going to get on the detail stuff, but you can see the median age here is 37, and their median age was like 63. Well, what does that mean? Oh, well, we're old. The community isn't. A high number of population, well, that shows on the next one, of Asian Pacificers. So a big Burmese population in that area. And within 5 miles of the church, there's nearly 50,000 people. They could look out the window. This is no kidding. 1,000 new housing units were being built within a mile of the church. And they weren't reaching any of them. So, I don't know what your context is, but you need to define this for people. And the convention and your association guy can help you look at your community. I went to Zion Baptist in 1982, and when I came from Ohio, the church I was in, we'd average baptizing 30 people a year in a small town of 1,000 people. I came to Zion, and they were rural, out in the county, 5 miles out in the county, surrounded by soybeans and cornfields. And this old deacon, Joe Hick Farley, said to me, he said, I see you up there in that Pioneer area up there in Ohio, you've been baptizing 30 people. He said, that ain't going to happen here. And I said, why not? He said, everybody around here goes to church. I said, really? Everybody around here goes to church. He said, we've not ever baptized 30 people. I said, I knew that. They had not. They hadn't baptized anybody the year before that. The year before that, they baptized 5. And I said, well, what about we go find out? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, if I come pastor here, why don't we draw a 3-mile circle around the church? We go knock on every door. We ask them 4 questions. What do you believe the biggest need in our community is? How could we help meet that need? How could we pray for you? And when you go to church, where do you go? And I said, if I come here, would you help do that? I flipped it on him. He said, well, yeah, I guess. So I came in October, and then in March, I wanted to lead up to Easter. Weather got a little better. And so he helped me, he and his wife Cecil, they helped me organize. They got the deacons, and we set it up, and we knocked on every door within 3 miles of that church. And guess how many families we found within 3 miles? Within 3 miles of that church, we found out, listen to this, 142 families that didn't go to church anywhere. They were blown away. They couldn't believe it. Brother Joe said, well, then, I was wrong. I said, Miss Farley, did you hear that? Anyway, we weren't going to reach all of them, but man, I loaded the guns. We're going to go after them. So we went after them with Easter. We also invited them to Easter service when we went and knocked on their door. And we didn't reach all of them, but guess what? We reached 10 of them in the next year. First year I was there, we had 52 additions. 38 of them was baptism. Why? Because we saw that the fields were white unto harvest. You got to get your people to see it. They don't see the lost people. And here's the deal. A lot of churches want to grow, but they want to grow with people just like them. Well, you get out there, it's a different world. You got to be willing to have your arms open. Come to me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Jesus didn't cull people. Aren't you glad? So this is a big deal for this team. Okay? Context, demographics, big deal. Then you ask questions. Okay? Look at your deal. What are the characteristics of our surrounding community? Is it changing or stagnant? Is the church adapting to the changing community? Does the congregation demographics represent the community demographics? So how do you do that? Well, a simple way. You give them a 3x5 card, and every week for 4 weeks you ask them to put their age and gender. And most people will know their gender. They're not as that confused. It'll be male or female. But you do that for 4 weeks and you tabulate it, and then with preschool, you already know who's there. You get that. You can get the children, if not in worship with you. But at the end of 4 weeks, you're going to tabulate that, and then you're going to take the demographics of the community and you're going to compare them to the demographics within the church. And almost without exception, your church will be older than the community. And the age group you're missing are the 25 to 42-year-olds. And their children. That's the age group. That's true where that's every church I've served in the last several years. They're older, and the community is younger, and there's a high percentage of preschool and children, and we're missing the Gen Xers. That's who we're missing. So that was true with the church I'm serving right now. What are we going to do? Well, we got to figure out how we can. Well, in order to do that, we got to upgrade our preschool and children's space, and that's in the pipeline. They need to see that. See, they need to see it. Who's out there? Now, where are you serving?
Just outside Livingston, Alabama.
Where's Livingston?
60 miles southwest of Tuscaloosa.
So, I know where it is. Yeah, I've been in Linden. You're not too terribly far from. Yeah, I know where Linden. I went to preach in Linden, and I was telling them Sunday night how old I am. I was born in 1951. I said, I was telling them about the bouffant hair, and this lady in the church, I didn't see her until I said that, and she kind of woke up. She had big hair. So after it's over with, she came down to the end of the service, and she said, well, I'm your bouffant lady. And she said, I was born the same year you were. And she said, you didn't look your age till I got close to you. What do you say to that? I wanted to say, well, you looked old from the back of the church, but I thought, well, I've done some stupid things, but I just said, well, I'm born in 1951.
In Alabama, you say, bless your heart.
Bless your heart. That's right. So here's the deal. Here's what current reality. Here's what you're trying to do. You're trying to see what your church looks like up close. Now, it's hard for you to pull this off, but if you could, what I did every year was I would ask a fellow pastor or somebody from another church to come and visit my church and give me a grade on how they were handled. Were you greeted? Did you find the nursery? How was your worship experience? and I had them meet with my hospitality team, tell them the truth. We thought we was better than we were. I was constantly defining reality. Constantly. You just can't wait every 3 to 5 years. You just got to keep doing it, because the truth is things change. So this context team is, how effectively are we adjusting to the community? So you're going to ask the question at the end of the cultural team, based on the previous answered questions, what insights have we gained about the culture of our church? What would be next steps related to our church culture and the mission of our church? What do we need? What are the concerns that we have? What do we need to look at? And then the same thing is true with the context. You're trying to get them you're gathering this information. Okay? Do you all see what we're doing here? We're gathering this information, and we're throwing pieces of the puzzle on the table, and you're sharing it with them. You're making sure that they're getting it. Are y'all getting this? You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're asking them. Is everybody getting this? You understand what the context team has just told us about, our internal different graphics and the people in our community and all this kind of stuff, But they had all these excuses. Well, the community's changed. People have moved. People that have moved in are different than us. And I said, well, what does that mean? You think God planted this church? I think he planned it in 1946 or something. You think God put this church here in 1946 and he didn't know what was going to happen in 2024? Listen, they can tell you when the next solar eclipse is going to happen in America for 200 years. Who did that? God did that. God's a planning God. He's a God of details. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know your church is going to be like this in 2024. Sorry about that, I'm just stupid. That's what we think. We just think God's stupid. That he wound up the world and it's just unwound it, God's an intervention God. He intervenes. Those Emmaus disciples walking away from Jerusalem, Jesus came to them. It's a model of evangelism, conversational. He entered their journey, asked them questions, revealed himself to them. God's a God that comes to us. He saves us. He's a good God, isn't he? He's a good God. We got people around us that need to know we serve a good God. So you're putting all this stuff together. Now, if you look at the bottom of this handout right here, okay? Bottom of this handout. Strategic initiative. Based on the information and insights gleaned from examining our church culture and context, what ministries need to be started or expanded, what organizational changes need to be made to better prepare to fulfill the Great Commission, how do our existing facilities need to be expanded or reconfigured, and then any other ideas that they have. Okay? So are you all understanding? You all getting this process? Now listen, this is not easy. It's hard work. But it's worth it. Here's what will happen. If you do this and you do it intentionally and bathed in prayer and humble to see what God wants to teach you, there will be people in heaven that wouldn't be otherwise. You got to see that. If we change, there's going to be people saved because of the changes that we made. And here's what I say to churches. Look, if we don't change, we're just telling our community, go to hell. We don't care. And if you don't care, then why are we here? My wife likes to go to Merle Norman and buy makeup. And we went there the other day in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, and the sign was up on this big sign, but Merle Norman had gone out of business. And here's what she said. If they've gone out of business, they ought to take down their sign. If you're not baptizing people and people's lives aren't being changed and you aren't involved in missions and you aren't involved in ministry and you aren't calling people out, take down your sign. Call yourself a civic club or something. I don't know what you call yourself, but take the word church out. I'm telling you, we don't have time to beat around the bush. You beat around the bush, they talk about the bush. They do. You just can't lollygag around that. So we want to love people. We want to encourage them. We want to say thank you. We want to serve them. But there's got to be a passion driving you. Transformation started when it started in me. And if I ever lose my passion, I'll just quit. I won't do this anymore. I'm 72 years old. I don't know how much longer I got, but I'm going to do it with everything I got. Amen. I'd as soon burn out as rust out, wouldn't you? I mean, I don't want to rust out. I ain't going to. My wife, there in COVID, nobody wanted a transitional pastor or interim, so I sat in a pew at First Baptist Hendersonville after they let us go back. I sat in a pew for about 6 months. I'm a terrible pew person. I was making notes and I was looking around. She said, "Sit still." Because I don't sit in church with her. I'm always preaching. She said, "Sit still." We got in the car and she said, "You ain't a good pew person." I looked at her and I said, "Charlene, God didn't call me to sit in a pew." I said, "There'll come a day I'll have to sit in a pew. But it ain't now." I drive 85 miles one way to go to serve a church on Sunday morning. Why? Because I want to help people. I want to help churches be more effective because I want to see boys and girls, men and women come to Christ. So this is important stuff. And so we get down to beginning to communicate the vision. And so to do it, you've got to change the conversation. Let's get to this. So this is Emmanuel Baptist Church in Glasgow, Kentucky, and they were in trouble. They were in a spiral, and the pastor left under fire, and they were in a lot of different ways in difficulty. So I went there, I think in February of 21, I think that's right. And so in April, I said, "When are you having Bible school?" Well, we haven't had Bible school the last 3 years. Why? The COVID. I said, "What's it got?" I said, "I understand 1 year you didn't have it." Well, last year the pastor didn't want to do it. He didn't believe in Bible school. Okay. And I said, "Didn't believe in Bible school." Okay. I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to have Bible school." And they said, "Well, that's not on the calendar. We haven't voted to do it." I said, "Ain't no vote." "Have you done Bible school in the past?" "Yeah." I said, "You think boys and girls will be saved if we share the gospel?" "Yeah." I said, "We're going to have Bible school." And they said, "Well, we don't have anybody to lead it." And I said, "I already got somebody." I'd already talked to him. I knew we was going to do it. I love Bible school. It's the only time in church I ever had fun. You could wear shorts. They sang songs you could dance to. They didn't call it that, It was creative movement. They fed you. You had crafts. The pastor actually took his clip-off tie off and, it was real for a little bit. I love Bible school. And so I said, "Well, we're going to have Bible school. Set a date." So Erica became the director. And this is the thing, we had Bible school. I said, "Here's what we're going to have. We're going to pray. We're going to pray that God will bless, save boys and girls." And guess what? We shared the gospel every night. I didn't wait till Thursday. Lifeway's wrong. They're wrong about a lot of things, but the gospel night's Thursday night. What? Share the gospel every night. Thursday night, we had 10 kids get saved. They hadn't had 10 people saved in that church in years. Oh my Lord, it's like lighting a match. Just whoa! What are we going to do with them, preacher? We're going to baptize them. Well, how are we going to do it? We're going to go to Barren River Lake. That wasn't far. They're just only about 20 minutes. We went down, had our service there. Campers came. We went down and baptized. Then I said, anybody else want to be baptized today? Well, there's water. Philip, there's water. Had two 70-year-olds. One of them, this lady right here. She said, I want to be baptized. I said, well, she said, I made profession of faith when I was 9, but I've never been baptized. This older lady, older than her, she was fully dressed, had hose on, the whole deal. She said, I don't want to be baptized. She said, I want to be baptized. And I said, well, do it. She said, can I do it in my clothes? I said, please. She said, I don't have to change. I said, no. We'll change. We'll do it right now. We got towels. And so we helped her. I'm telling you, it changed the whole conversation. They decided they were going to live. Easter Sunday, that church that was running 70 when I went there, at Easter Sunday had 207. Pastor's been there since last April, and in a year they've baptized 33. They're living. Your church needs a pulse, right? This will help you. You got to change the conversation, okay? And then part of that's the short-term wins. I don't get into all these different things, but in order to get the changes needed, you got to know how to develop and execute a strategic plan. What time will lunch be ready? Around 12. Okay. I don't know whether to. Well, let's just talk about questions right now. I want to get into some of this other stuff right after lunch. So, questions, thoughts. What have you heard? Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned that this is an ongoing process, not every 3 to 5 years.
Right.
But you've got your team meeting for
Right.
6 months.
That's right.
So how
Okay,
does
so after let's just say it takes them 6 months. Let's just say that. Then, and we're going to talk after lunch about coming up with some specific things and how to use the strategy. Okay. I may go ahead and get into this here in a minute, but once you come up with your 2 or 3 strategic initiatives, things you'd like to see happen, you want to prioritize them and what could happen in 3 to 6 months, what could happen in 6 to 12, what could happen in 12 to 18 months. So no more than 3 strategic things that you're going to do. You're going to share those with the church. They are, not you. They're going to report and give an overview of the process, and here's what we've come up with. And then the church, at some point, needs to approve those. You know, however way you go about it, business meeting or whatever. And so once you get an affirmation, a thumbs up, then the vision team dissolves. And you then assign these strategic initiatives to different standing committees or ministries. And the deal is that they need to be held accountable. Okay. You want to have some early wins. What can we do in 3 to 6 months that would make the biggest impact? That's fairly easy to do. It doesn't take a long time. And so you want to pull the trigger on some of those things. Yeah, but you're going to use the existing folks. And so generally it's going to take you 12 to 18 months to see these things implemented, executed. The 2 downsides of strategic planning is 3. One, we try to do it too fast. We try to microwave it. And then a corollary to that is we just tell people what to do instead of helping them. This is a collaborative process. You want them engaged in this. The second downside is we try to do too much. You'll have to hold that committee back. They'll want to, go out and try to do too much too quick. And the problem with that is they don't do any of it. They get discouraged. They get overwhelmed. So you got to have some early wins that people are going, that's good. We can build on that, And then the third piece in strategic planning is execution. They don't execute it. They have good ideas, but there's nobody driving the execution. That's where you as a pastor have to come in. And if you got a Sunday school director, you got a discipleship director, you got some people that, if you got some other lay people that can help, that will be willing to carry the water, if you will, carry that, then, you just gotta, it's like pumping water. You just can't ever quit. You got to keep it right in front of them. And then you want to celebrate. You want to celebrate the wins, whatever it is. We are terrible as Baptists about celebrating. We're really good at critiquing. We have the gift of criticism. And because if we criticize, we don't have to do anything about it. We can just bellyache. But celebrating is a big deal. And it's patting people on the back. Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate what we're doing. So after 18 months then, what happens is change brings about change. So during the process, you may do things quicker than you've laid out. See, it may happen sooner than you think. Other things they're conundrums. They're harder nuts to crack. For instance, let's just get into it. Yeah, that's fine. So let's just say that you have gotten all this information, okay? And you're about 4 months in. You want them to give it, this is where you come in. And this is, some people it's natural, some people it's something, it's a skill. It's like a pure heart, skillful hands. This is a skill that you may need to learn. But they're going to give you all that information. Okay? You're going to synthesize it. And you're going to write an executive summary that's about 5 to 8 pages of the church context, the church culture, and the church context. You're going to summarize all that. It doesn't have to be that long, but generally it's 6 to 8 pages is a nice summary, because you don't want them to have to take all that information and wade through it and say, what does it mean? You want to give it in a form that they then can digest it.
This is to the team.
This is to the team. So you're going to put that together. I usually ask them, let's just say, I give them a date. I want all the information, let's just say, by the middle of December. Well, by the middle of January then, I had it summarized. And we sent it out then to the team. And I gave them 2 weeks to read it. Pray over it. Okay? All right? And so then the next step then is you provide copies a week. It says a week. I do 2 weeks because people get busy, and I send an email reminder. Make sure to read the information before you come next week or whatever. And then you want to take them away. You don't have to go anywhere, but you want to get away for a 4 to 6 hours, a little long. 4 hours is about right, but you might have to do 6. But you want to take them away, and you're going. This is when the water hits the wheel. This is it. You're going to land the plane. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. You're not going to land the plane. And so at the beginning, you're going to take about 45 minutes and you're going to review the summary. Okay? So we've got two pieces of the puzzle, right? We got the right people. And now we're going to get the right information. We want to make sure everybody's engaged with that information that we have gleaned the last 4 months. So you're going to walk them through that. You want to make sure, if you have to go back and repeat it. I've been studying Philippians. Paul repeats himself 3 times, says the same thing. Tell them you told them, tell them again, tell them again. And then, after you've done that, okay, any questions? Anybody got any questions? Okay. Then you put them in random groups. You don't want them in the teams they were in. You want to mix it up. You say, okay, we're going to count off. If you want 4 groups, they count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Otherwise, they'll get with their buddies. You want to mix it up. And you say, okay, we're going to meet if you got 20 people, then it'll be 5 at a table. If you got 12, there's going to be 3. You don't want less than 3. 15's a nice number, whatever. But anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the division is. And you say, okay, here's your assignment. What did you hear? What did you hear in the summary? What were the things that jumped out at you? And you want them to do 3 things. All right? You want them to list from what they have heard, what are the celebrations? What are we going to pat ourselves on the back about? We're doing pretty good about this. This church I'm in now, they really think they're doing Bible school really well. I don't know if they do or not, but they think they do. And probably do. What are the opportunities for ministry that we've seen based on the information? Does this make sense, Brad? You getting this? And then what are the obstacles you've seen that we need to overcome? Those are those 4 groups. Now you're looking at me like you're processing.
So every group does.
Every group. Every table.
I'm in that room right now.
Every table, you're going to ask them to think, what'd you hear? And then how can you categorize? What are the things we need to celebrate that we want to keep doing? We want to build on. They do, this church I'm in now, they do a harvest festival. And then they do a trunk or treat. They had 1,000 people in their parking lot. The problem was they didn't do anything with them. But they thought that was they want to keep doing that. Okay, well so anyway, what are the opportunities for ministry? Well, we got to reach the 25 to 44-year-olds. They're here. Everybody saw that. And then what are the obstacles we got to overcome? Well, part of it's our building. We're not kid friendly. It's the old building built in the 60s, they got the steeple and the balcony in the back and blah, blah, all that. What other takeaways or insights? Okay? So, here's what this is real. Okay? This is real. I brought this to show you guys. Then you have them put it on the tear sheet like this. Every group. What are the celebrations? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? Whatever. You're going to look at some of that. Opportunities and obstacles. Opportunities, different things. Okay? Y'all getting this? Any questions about this? Why do we do this? Why is this important piece of strategy planning? Why is this piece right here important?
They've got a process.
Right. It's what they see. It's engaging.
You also have a tangible way to see where you're going.
That's exactly right.
What goals you've actually met or didn't meet at a certain point in time.
That is correct.
Is they get buying into what's actually.
That's right. It's not you doing it. You see, if you got 20 people, each one of them impacts 3 or 4. And so if you got a church around 100, the 20 people, they're the salesman for this. I mean, I hate to use that word, but they're going to sell it. You don't have to, you don't have to be the one up there. I heard of a pastor in Kentucky that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd go out at the edge of town and sit up on this hill. And he did it every day, except Sundays. And so people got concerned, what's he doing? So they assigned the chairman of deacons to go out there finally at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and figure out what he was doing. And he drove up and said, Pastor, it's a little awkward. You come out here at 3 o'clock every day. What are you doing? He said, well, at 3 o'clock every day, the train goes through. I like to see something around here that moves that I don't have to push. Here's what I found in church. If you've got to push it, it's probably not of God. If you chase it, it's probably of God. You want to get some things that you got to chase. If I was chasing to keep up, I felt like I was on the right track. If I was just trying to have to push stuff all the time, they were probably just programs that were stale and dead. And it's like my brother over here. You said, kill the cattle or something. I mean, it's like simple church, which there are no simple churches, by the way. I was involved in all that research. There's no such thing. You can't find a simple church. But the concept behind a simple church was that if it's living, help it. If it's dying, let it. And as simple as that. If it's living, let's pour water on it, fertilize it, put more people on it. If it's dying, let it die. So people read simple church and did stupid stuff, went back and killed WMU. Well, that's stupid. Well, it's stupid. Why would you do that? They do great work. I mean, they were some of my greatest advocates. Man, I wanted the WMU to, I had grandparents that were WMU people, and, it was a big deal and all that. But anyway, so out of this, you're trying to find some things that they want to see done. Go ahead.
Potentially in this, not only the pastor be encouraged when he sees the excitement, but also potentially begin to see who's passionate about what.
Absolutely. And that's the people then that you give to shepherd that. Mm-hmm. So out of this, you want to come up with the common things. Okay? Can you see what I've done here? They've come up with their celebrations, opportunities, and obstacles. Okay? And so the number one thing that several people had up here, and some of this overlapped, was a discipleship strategy. I asked the question, if I joined Horse Cave Baptist Church, how are you going to help me grow as a believer? They had no process. Most churches, it's you join, it's good luck, hope you make it. We dunk you and drop you. That's what I grew up with. I was baptized. Nobody taught me what it meant to be a Christian. My dad taught me to land survey, taught me math and physics and stuff. And they never taught me how to study the Bible, never taught me how to pray, never taught me what it meant to be a believer. Now, they were good people. They went to church. They thought it was a pastor's responsibility. They thought the Sunday school teacher did it. You got to decide, and they'll help you decide, what's the one thing you want to do first? Now, this one is hard, and it isn't necessarily the first thing we're going to work on. But I'm just telling you, this was top of mind. People say we got to have a discipleship strategy that we need to reach youth and children, particularly, and young adults. Here was the other one that they came up with. They wanted outreach to millennials. Actually, it's more the Gen X people, but anyway, reach kids and youth. And so what you're trying to do here then is identify the common things. Okay? And it's pretty simple to do. You know, it's so they came up, the three things we're going to work on is we're going to work on a discipleship strategy, we're going to work on outreach to millennials, and we're going to try to make the church more inviting. Well, guess what we're going to try to do first? That one right there. We've already pulled the trigger on it. Because in order to reach them, and even to help people grow, we want the facilities to be much more user-friendly. So that's a big deal. It's going to cost about $60,000 to do it. And eventually, when they move the preschool and children's area and relocate it to be more effective and all that, it's going to cost about $200,000. But that's down the road. That's how this works. So you ask, what do you do with this? Well, once we have what happened in the midst of the process, okay, as they examined how they're organized, they had a church council in their bylaws, but they could not remember the last time it had ever met. Pastor been there 27 years, never met. The problem was most church councils are a dinosaur. There's too many people, you know, and they don't have any kind of intentionality and organization to them. They're just there. So they reorganized their church council to be more like a leadership team. Now they have 6 people that oversee different areas, and then the ministries are clustered under those 6 people. We met Sunday afternoon for 3 hours. And these things then, that was our first meeting since the church approved our strategic initiatives. And now we dole them out to different people on the council. They meet every month. They have responsibility. We have a website that's just for the church council where we can post stuff. It's just a website for them. Nobody else can see it. We can post information. We can post, they're getting ready for Bible school. They need workers. There's all kinds of stuff that we've developed. They did this. I don't know how to develop a website. My 9-year-old does. I don't know. But that's what they did. So it has energized the church. Strategic planning then has become a part of their, I won't say DNA yet, but certainly their thinking. They're thinking more strategically. And that's what you're trying to get. That's what you're trying to get to here, is more strategic. Questions about this part? You got to land the plane.
So when your team, you're at tables,
Mm-hmm.
they're answering, they're answering your 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
When they report back, all of them report on what they discovered, and you're writing on the...
No, they write. They take a tear sheet.
Okay.
I give them tear sheets and say, list your 3 or 4 things that you get from this that would relate somehow to these 3 things: celebrations, opportunities. They could go beyond that, but those are just guidelines to get them. If you give people a framework, it's a little easier than just a blank page.
That word, you're talking about where we write the summary.
That's on the front end. You've given them the summary, and you've shared it with them. And then you put them in these groups, they're in these groups of 4 or 5 people. And you say, talk among yourselves as to what you heard from the summary that would relate to celebrations, opportunities, obstacles, or anything else you want to talk about. What did you hear? Well, some of the burden was we don't have anybody working with youth. Nobody. We don't have anybody. The youth go into a young adult Bible study class because the 4 or 5 youth coming, their dad teaches the class. I mean, it's tragic. Well, they were broken over it. Out of that, we got 3 people to start helping with youth. But, I mean, I had ranted and raved about it. To know, did it make a difference? They got broken over it. And automatically our youth has moved from 4 to 5 to 12. And but anyway, you're wanting them, because I mean, my theology is I believe in the priesthood of the believer. We're not Catholics. We believe God speaks to believers. You can talk to Jesus, to God directly through Jesus. You don't have to go through a priest. We've become more Catholic in our thinking the last 30 years, I think. We've become more hierarchical. And pastors have seen this top-down stuff, and they've gone to we just tell the people what to do. They don't have any say-so. Well, you wonder why people aren't discipled. You wonder why people aren't being called. We've screwed the process up. We've become priest in a sense instead of pastors, shepherds. This is a shepherding tool. So let's review and then we'll eat. So, what was the first thing you got to do in the strategic plan? What's number one? It's a sense of urgency. Now that may take you a little while. And that may be a prayer. That may be a prayer piece that you need to spend some time with God about. And part of it is leadership by walking around, listening to people. I'll tell you the part we do in transitional pastor ministry that helps is we do listening sessions. It'd be helpful for any pastor who's been in his church very long to just gather some people and just listen to them. What do you think the biggest needs in our church are? What's the biggest burden you have? Just listen to them.
Would that be a good thing to do? If you're in a smaller church.
Yeah, sure.
35, 40, you deal on a Wednesday night, is that something you do during that particular time?
I would do it with 10 or 12. 35, you'll get, nobody will talk. I mean, the ones that talk will dominate. So if you do 10 or 12, you just want everybody in the room to talk. And you can make up whatever questions you want. But I ask them, when are the greatest time in the life of the church? Because I'm going in brand new. When are the greatest time in the life of the church? What are you most excited about? What would you like to see happen in 3 to 5 years? And how could I pray? How can I pray for the church? You as a pastor, you may want to ask some whole different questions. But listening, I'm going to make a blanket statement, but my experience has been, particularly in following guys as the transitional pastor, that the pastor that just left did not understand the people. And the reason for that was he didn't listen. He was isolated and insulated. It's amazing how people. You mean you really want to know? Yeah, I do. Really want to know. And I preach. You all can tell from what I do here. I'm transparent. I think you got to open your life to people. And I'm not proud of the fact that I was an alcoholic for years. But I had a guy Sunday that I shared, that I basically, at 24, I woke up sick and tired of waking up sick and tired. And what I found in Jesus was new life. The resurrection brings new life. And this guy is a recovering alcoholic, but has been struggling with it, and just ran down the aisle Sunday morning. He's a big old boy, about knocked me down. Bear hugged me. I thought he was going to break my ribs. He said, man, I just can't believe that you as a pastor would be that transparent. He said, I'm struggling. So we got down and prayed. And, you don't have to tell people how smart you are. They'll figure it out. I started preaching in Ohio. I was right out of seminary. And, I was pretty good at Greek. And so, stupid stuff, man. So they were enamored with the King James, and so I thought, well, I'll just preach out of the Greek New Testament. I would not recommend doing that, by the way. And so I asked my wife, I said, they kind of had a dull look. She said, Dan, here's the deal. We're not all giraffes. Put the food down where everybody can eat. She said, we haven't been to seminary. She said, I typed all your papers, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Jesus made complicated things simple. And my greatest compliment is when a 9-year-old compliments my sermon. A 9-year-old. And I figure if they get it, the adults will get it. That's really, my audience on Sunday mornings is a 9-year-old. And I tell a lot of stories, and I try to make the gospel real and all that. Well, this is trying to make it real to people. What you're doing is teaching them how to do church. And what we're going to do after lunch, are we going to take an hour, or are we going to take a little less than that, 45 minutes or so? What I got after lunch is only about 30 minutes. But I want to teach you how to use this piece right here. Okay? And you can use it then to put details to these things. Okay? So let's just take a discipleship strategy. You're going to develop a discipleship strategy. I'm going to give you an example. I'm giving you an example of exactly how you would do that. Okay? And you want to have whatever future state or whatever initiative you want to do. This is a guide of what to do to execute that strategy. Does that make sense? But we need about 30 minutes to walk you through that. Ken? And I'll kind of bring us up to where we are. I guess the first thing is you need to feel a sense that it's time for some new thinking in your church. This isn't just something you just jump into. It's timing is it has to be right. And there are times, there's sometimes it's for me it's when the pastor leaves, but it could be when a church hits a wall. The new opportunities come, or there's been a revival, or I don't know, any number of things. But there's got to be this burden that you're feeling as a pastor. We need to have a fresh vision, who we are and where we are. Those are the two key things. Who we are, where we are. And that means you got to look at yourself. You got to take a good time, look yourself in the mirror and say, am I part of the problem? And I pastored in the same location for 16 years, but I pastored 5 different churches in the same location. And I had to learn how to pastor 5 different churches. I went from 150 to 250 to 350 to 450 to almost 600. And each one of those was different. And I had to keep growing. And I would go to places that were ahead of me, numbers-wise and organizationally, and I would ask. I'd visit, could I come and learn from you how to manage a staff, how to hire staff, how to have a church that's running 400, how's a church of 500, how's a church of whatever it is. And then I always brought in help. I'm a state convention advocate. Of course, I worked at one for almost 8 years. When I was at Lifeway, I was the state convention coordinator guy. I just think state conventions are a great asset. I think associations are. I had about every job in the association you could have, except for the director. I was head of this and head of that. And I got to the size that we did not need the association needed us. But we were engaged. We were the number one giver. And so I just think, there's resources to take advantage of. Other pastors, you could do this with a cluster of pastors, have your own people, but have 2 or 3 pastors doing it, and you all are cross-pollinating each other. You're kind of helping each other. Does that make sense? You could do it and learn from each other. I was in a study group for about 5 years with other pastors, and we planned our sermons together for a year. And we did not preach necessarily the same thing, but we were on the same themes. And we met together once a month and learned from each other, and it was a great accountability for me. And so my concern for where we are in the culture is we have become isolated from each other. And that's why I so appreciate Alabama. I think they're one of the best conventions anywhere. And I really appreciate them doing this, don't you all? Let's thank them. I mean, this is and they're still personalized. They're still, they're offering things that are practical. But don't try to do this alone. I just beg of you, don't think that you're, what the devil wants to do is he wants to cut us out of the herd and think we're the only ones. And there's nothing really new under the sun. So there's got to be this burden that that something needs to change. And so then you got to put together this team. And it may be, you're going to dose the church a little bit. You may want to just throw a demographic out there. Did you realize within 3 miles of this church, we got 7,000 people, and 85% of them don't go anywhere? Do you realize that? This, you start putting it out there. But then you're starting to pray over who's going to be on that team. You're praying over it. Who are the people that need to serve? And you can put it out there, if you want to volunteer for it, you want to put your name in, but it doesn't mean you're going to be on it. But you want to get the right people. I can't emphasize that enough. If you get the right people that are godly, that are willing to work a process, that have the best interests of the church in mind. I worked at a big church in Alexandria, Virginia, First Baptist Alexandria. People of the free world are there. NSA, budget office. But we got this 88-year-old woman to be on this team, planning team. And she'd been a member of that church all her life, and nobody had ever asked her to serve on anything. 88 years old. The pastor picked her. I didn't know who to pick, but he just said, this woman knows the history of this church, but she's not ever had a leadership position. She became the leader of that bunch. She got up and was passionate about reaching that community, and actually she ended up giving some of the final report to the church. And she said, this is the first time I've ever been asked my opinion. 88 years old. Somehow they were blind. So, right people. You got that? Okay. And then, once you get those people, then you're going to organize them into 2 teams. You're going to look at who you are, church culture. You're going to help another team look at where they are. And that includes your facilities and all that kind of stuff, but those also look at the demographics. You're going to give them some questions to answer, some research to do, some digging around, all that. You're going to look at your ACP and all that kind of stuff. All that you're going to meet. You have an initial meeting, and then every month you have a meeting. And at those monthly meetings, those teams report to the entire group. What have you learned? What have you learned? What are insights? And usually those meetings take about 2 hours. Okay? And then you give them a deadline. You want to be done by a certain date. Usually it's 2 months. It could be 3 or whatever, but according to time of year it is. But we want to have all this information gathered, and then they're going to give that to you. That's your part. You're going to take it and you're going to read through it and you're going to summarize it, put all the salient points. You don't want to leave anything pertinent out, but some of the stuff they'll come up with is you have to interpret that. Okay? And so you're going to put that together. It usually takes 2 or 3 weeks. And then you send it out. Send it out to them. And say, okay, we're going to meet for 4 hours. I usually do it on a Sunday. I usually meet from like 4 to 8 and have a little meal, the light stuff in the middle, give them a break. But do it whenever you can. Then out of that, at that retreat then, you're going to re-engage them with that summary. You're going to share with them. I just walk through it. I read it, give a little interpretation. Anybody got a question about that? Let's make sure we're all clear about that. That takes about 45 minutes or an hour. And then you're going to put them into groups, 4 or 5 at a table. And you just have them count off, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And it works very well. They get at that table. You ask them then to come up with what are the things they heard. What are the celebrations? What are the opportunities? What are the obstacles? And anything else they want to share. But those are the kind of the framework that you're trying to work on. And then they take tear sheets like this and you give them at least an hour. Okay? And what I do in that setting is I walk around to every table and I want to make sure that one person isn't dominating the conversation. I want to make sure everybody at the table, what I'll ask is everybody at the table had an opportunity to speak. And if somebody had an opportunity to speak, I'll just say, well, it's your turn. I want everybody to be heard. Because you have a tendency in a meeting like that for people to dominate. And so, okay, we're going to hear from so-and-so. Okay, I walk around. Listen, how's it going? You got any questions? Any way I can help you? And I'm telling you, I've done this, I don't know how many times. They get it. They get this. I've never done this that they don't get it. Ever. 100%. They come out of it really with where they need to be. I can't say that about much else. But you work this process. These people, the Holy Spirit speaks what needs to be said. And it's them speaking it, not you. Does that make sense? And then you ask them to write down whatever they see. What would you like to see us do? Based on what you've heard, based on the information, what are the things you think we need to address? And you ask them to do no more than 4. Don't give me 20 things. Give me 3 or 4. And so they'll come up with that. You give them an hour or so, you make sure they're getting it. And then you have them put it up on the wall and say, okay, share this with us. And then what you begin to see then is you'll always see common things. I've never done it that there isn't common things. Otherwise, they haven't heard.
If they're not common things, the people haven't heard it. Because there's commonalities. Now, you should know where they need to end up. You should know that. But you may not know the order. You may not have said it the same way, but you generally get a feel for this needs to be done strategically. And if you've got the right people and you put the right information in the room and you give them time, they will come up with the right stuff. You just got to trust them. And don't violate the process. Don't jump in and say, well, you've missed this. Don't jump in and tell them what to do. Because you violated it. You want them to understand at the beginning that this is collaborative. That your opinion matters. That everybody has a voice. And that we believe the Holy Spirit will guide us to do what needs to be done. Okay? Now, questions about that? Yeah.
You've done this a
number of times.
In your opinion,
in my opinion,
the best way to get the group.
Pick them.
Pick them. Okay.
Yeah, I think otherwise, the New Testament model was never volunteers. Nothing in the Bible about that. Jesus recruited people personally. He called people personally. He didn't get up on a mountain and say, anybody wants to come. In fact, he said, if you're going to come, deny yourself. Let me bury my father. Let the dead bury the dead. So I think in this instance, and almost every instance, it's personal. I worked through the deacons because they were the ones that asked me to come. And I said, you all put a list together. I want you to pray about it. I said it needs to be men and women. It needs to be age group. It needs to be multi-generational. You need to have people that have a passion about preschool and children and youth and worship and outreach and, you need to have people that have at least a cursory understanding of the facilities. People that have administrative skills can look at examine the bylaws and all that kind of stuff. And, I give them copies of other churches' bylaws to look at. Now, state convention can help you. Your association can help you because, it's not plagiarism. It's learning what other people, how they're saying it, and then they compare theirs with a sister church. You don't want to go to Birmingham and compare a church in southern Alabama. It's a different culture. But I think recruiting workers. This church council that we had, we needed 6 people. And there were people on the transition team that I felt like could help. But here was how I did it. I had a guy that's an attorney, but he's retired. I needed somebody to be over the administrative stuff, kind of oversee that. So here's his name's Greg. I went to him one day after church. I said, can you just stick around a minute? And he goes, yeah. And I said, Greg, I know you've been real active here, but we need somebody that has administrative leadership skills. I've been watching you. I believe you have a heart for that. Would you pray about serving on our church council? And he said, well, I will. So the next week he came back and said, I'll do it. Very seldom have I ever had people turn me down. But you just got to do it one-on-one. And so picking this team then is vital. Jesus chose the 12. Now, why did he put Judas in there? He was probably predestined for one of them to betray him. But part of it shows that, you're going to have trouble. People are human. But you need the best people you can. Make sure you get an older teenager. That's a really good deal. It's nice to have somebody fairly new to the church. New meaning in the last couple of years, if you got somebody. So I think handpicking them
Because if you get the wrong people in the room, the process can be hijacked. And so that's a great question. I think picking them.
So I know every context is a little bit different.
Yeah, it is. They're all different.
Talk about picking them and stuff like that. So we, as a church, about 150, we vote and approve a nominating.
Are those
committee
doors,
report.
can we shut those doors? I think those ice machines are, I'm having trouble hearing.
So is this something that, I mean, as Baptists, I mean, how would, I'm trying not to do something stupid here. Like, is this something that we create, you know, as a pastor, maybe through a deacon authority, or is this something we got to bring to the church at some point and say, can you guys approve these as our long-range planning or strategic planning
I wouldn't
committee?
call it long range. Yes, I think the church, you ought to get church approval for that. I do. I think it's whatever body that you feel could be most helpful with that. It could be a deacon body. That it'd be nice in most of our settings to have the deacons on board with that. I think you need to be clear in your mind what you're trying to accomplish, and just say, you can say, I've been to a conference and there was a strategic planning process. I really would believe that's something that would benefit us.
Could I explain it to you guys and let you think about it? And then it would, they could bring it to the church to recommend that we take 6 months and we put some, up to 20, you wouldn't even have to say, but some key people, 12 to 20, whatever. And we'll be reporting back to the church on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Sure.
Got a lot of irons in the fire, so I'm trying to figure out how to organize those. We're also going to rewrite our constitution and bylaws. Is that something
You
that
put that in the process.
that would come to begin this process first and allow the other to flow out of?
That's correct. Yeah, I would put that on hold, but have that be part of what you want to examine. That's the administrative piece. That part of this is we need to look at and you give it, and you may have a bylaws committee already. We're going to ask them to look at our bylaws. And, yeah. Oh, I saw that hand though. So, yeah, whatever you've got, I think it's best to put it under that umbrella. And so what that does is it integrates it and you get collaboration. You're not just a standalone deal.
Sure.
And some of how you organize the thing needs to come out of what you would like to learn as a pastor, what you see some of the needs are. And it may be different than anything we've talked about here today. You may have some needs that we haven't really addressed. But it's very easy to customize this to your setting. And, yeah.
Dan, wouldn't you say too, especially for a pastor, as much as you can get the other leaders in the church to support it and to speak to the congregation besides
Absolutely.
you doing it,
Absolutely.
the more support you'll get from the people. Because if it's all about you and you're always the one trying to push it,
That's right.
then it's your idea.
Yeah.
It's not the church. And I mean, I've seen that in my ministry in the past, being passionate about something and pushing and then realizing I'm kind of out on a limb by myself, even though there might be others that agree with it, because there may be a little opposition and they're not willing to take a stand.
Sure.
But when you've got leaders that are standing and making those presentations, it's a different ballgame.
That's right. Timing is an issue. But you want to, generally, if you're feeling the burden, there'll be some other people. Use the deacons if you have godly men, which that's sometimes questionable. But I do think what he's saying is to you want to have a guiding coalition.
It may be an 88-year-old grandmother.
It may be. You never know. I mean, I had a lady that
was had a stroke that I needed to move. I had a nursery that was the size of a closet, and the beds were broken. These older women met in a room that would hold 40 adults, and they'd been there since right after the Second World War. They started this Nina Hankins Sunday School. Well, I needed that room to put the nursery in because we were growing, reaching kids. I went to the Sunday School director and said, Rick, I need that room. He said, oh, Brother Dan, they won't move. They didn't have to take roll. They had these armchairs, like they come out of school. They'd cross-stitch their names on the back. Oh, my God. So they just said, well, Wilma's not here today. Right? I said, we got to have that room. He said, oh, Brother Dan, my mother's in there. They won't move. I said, well, you mind if I talk to them? He said, if you're that stupid, he said, go on. So I'd only been there a few months. So I walked in there one Sunday morning, and the nursery was full. Had 4 bed babies in a little old room, 12 by 12. I walked in and said, ladies, how y'all doing? Good, Brother Dan. Tell me about Nina Hankins. And she was a missionary in Brazil. And I said, all that stuff. And I said, would you all take a field trip with me? She said, where do you want us to go? I said, just down the hallway. So there was 15 of them that morning. And here there's Cecil Farley. She had a stroke, and she had this 4-prong walker. And she was walking down the hallway like this, She was kind of the leader. She'd worked in the nursery for years, but had a stroke and couldn't do it. So I took them to the nursery, and I said, ladies, can y'all see a nursery? Yeah. I said, we got 4 babies. Oh, Brother Dan, that's great. I said, do you realize they got the smallest room in the church? No, we didn't know that. I said, you all realize you have the largest room in the church? Yeah, we knew that. I said, what do you think we ought to do about that? And Cecil Farley spoke up and said, well, we'll just move. And then she turned around to those women and said, won't we, women? Won't we, ladies? There was no vote. She decreed it. And she said, when would you like for us to move? And I said, where would you like for us to move? And I said, well, where would you like to move? I may be stupid by being ignorant, She said, well, we'll get together and we'll be in your office at 9 o'clock in the morning. I told my wife, I said, by 9 o'clock in the morning, those women will have vetoed her. Well, I didn't realize that they didn't have veto power. She walks in my office with Jean Tillotson and her Margaret Clutie, their sisters that run the library. Beautiful library. And so Miss Farley comes in, they sit down and said, Brother Dan, we figured out where we want to meet. I said, where do you want to meet? So, well, there's nobody in the library during Sunday school, so we're going to put folding chairs and we're going to meet in there. And she said, now you're going to need new beds in that room, aren't you? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, we'll take care of that. They had $2,000 that they'd been taking up $1 a week for years. They didn't know what they was going to do with it. They bought all new beds. They bought all new mobiles. They painted it. These women who hadn't done a tour of duty in the nursery in years, they took over the nursery. And they moved. If I needed somebody to move, I had one of my friends that I hunted with and fished with, and he had this big class. And I said, Brad, we need your room to start a new class. And he goes, well, he came to me after church, Brother Dan, we voted not to move. You voted. Yeah. So I stick Cecil Farley on him. I said, Miss Farley, Brad said he won't move. And she said, I'll take care of that. I can see her now walking across the sanctuary. Took that 4-prong walker, hit him on the leg. I read her lips. You will move. And he went, yes, ma'am. And she did. That class, I was there 16 years. That class of senior adult women moved 6 times. They said, whatever we need to do to reach the young people. You got to have some downfield blockers. You need to have some people that are in your corner. Right people, right information. Now, this is a guided process. You can't back out of this. You need to make sure those teams are doing their work. You need to help them. If it's something with the office, if it's something with the association, if it's something with state convention AD, you need to help them. You need to grease the skid so that they're getting this information. And then every month, you're making sure that, they're on track. So you're keeping your finger on it, Not doing it for them, but you're right there with them. And then once you get all that information, we've already talked about what you do with that. So, questions? I got one more piece before we go. Questions?
You drive an hour and a half on Sundays.
I do.
Hang out all day Sunday?
No, I only do Sunday morning.
So when do you have these meetings?
I have them after church. I have them right after church. Have a lady
Right after
fixes.
worship.
Have a lady fixes meals, and she's a great cook. She feels that's our gift. She runs the kitchen and she cooks for us. And we meet from like Sunday we ate and we met till 3 o'clock. I did that with the transition team. I met once a month on Sunday. Not everybody could do that, but that was part of my deal when I went there. I just think those meetings on Sundays are, you got people's attention. I presented it during Sunday school. I'm going to church Sunday in Jamestown, Tennessee. I'm doing this strategy planning with them. I'm starting Sunday, the First Baptist Jamestown, Tennessee. And I'll present it to the church on Sunday morning here in Sunday school. And I preach about it. And then they've already got their team together. I'm meeting with their team Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Okay? Now, we've talked about putting them in order. 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18 months, okay? So you need to categorize the 3 or 4 things that you come up with. And that's part of your leadership here. What do you need to do first? They need to be done in a sequence. What can we do first that would impact what we do second? What can we do second impact what we do third? You want to have an early win. And like with this church, the early win is going to be fixing the building, the lighting, and a bunch of stuff. And we want to have all that done before we get a new pastor. We don't want to saddle a pastor with having to do that stuff, But with you all, it's what are some things that people go, yeah. That's good. Yay, gods. You have to decide what that is. And then, don't try to do, then this is a tool. It's like the Excel spreadsheet we're going to send you. We're going to send you these electronically. You can take them and get them printed this size. I use these this size, but I start with the small ones, okay, as a teaching tool. I went through a training years ago at Lifeway called Wild Works. It's out of Dallas. And it's a strategic planning group that taught us how to use this tool. I took it and baptized it in church. Theirs was much more business oriented. But here's the way you start. You start with whatever future state or whatever strategic initiative you have up here, okay? So I'm just giving you, like this church I'm working with, they need to develop a disciple-making culture. Okay? And but it could be anything with you. It could be recruiting volunteers. We don't have enough volunteers, or whatever it is that you come up with. But this is a roadmap, if you will, of helping you to not only determine what you can do, but when to do it and how to do it. Who's responsible? So just make sure that the order, then, whatever that is, you want to help define what the current reality is of that. Good and bad. Now, you've already done that in your transition team, but whatever team it is that you have put together to execute this, could be your Sunday school team, it could be a discipleship team, it could be a team that you do, an ad hoc team that you put together. You want to make sure that they understand what you have discovered in the visioning process that is the current reality, is we don't have a strategy. And that's probably true in most churches. Our Sunday schools, whatever. We do have leaders, whatever it is. That's where you want to start. What's the current reality of that particular initiative? You should have already had defined all that. So it's just engaging them at that point. Does that make sense? Okay. Then you're going to talk about what are the obstacles you've got to overcome. Well, we've already got some of that, right? But and they're all the same. There's nothing new. Change. We don't like change. Whatever it is. What are the so this is like the stream with, these are rocks, and these are the ways to get over the obstacles to get us from current reality to where we want to go. And then that's where the creativity comes in. The rest of this is facts. Okay, what are you going to do first? What are you going to do in 3 to 6 months? And it doesn't have to be that. But, and that may not be the right order, but you want the first thing to be something you can do that you're 80 to 90% sure it'll happen. Okay? And then, it isn't an initiative until you have some success factors. When, who, how much it's going to cost, is it measurable? Okay, we want to do this. We want to start it in March. We're going to promote it the 1st of October. We're going to have a planning meeting in August. That is executable. You're a hunter. You go hunting, you have a checklist. Right? Ammo, gun, bow. Yeah. Whatever. Jerky. Snake boots. I wear snake boots in Alabama. I've seen too many of them big old snakes down there. So, you understand this? Executable. It can't be just we want to do better. It can be we just want to have a new members class. Well, when? Who's going to do that? How are you going to know it's been accomplished? Well, we've started it. What's the next step? Well, be whatever you want, but it's, okay, we're going to communicate it. Once we get it in place, of when we're going to start it, who's going to do it, what material, now we're going to communicate it. See, we're going to put it on the website, we're going to have testimonies, however way you're going to do it. Here's the way I did with new members. We took Sunday school, and for 4 weeks, everybody went through the same thing. We get a baseline. And then everybody in the future that came into the church had to go through that same class. That makes sense? That way you grandfathered people in. You do it however way you want. And then the last thing is you're going to enlist leaders.
So you do this for each.
That's correct. Each one of those three. That's right. That's exactly right. And then you assign them. You get the people that are going to do this to put this together. Okay, looks like if you're going to do if that's what you're going to do, let's say that you're going to you're going to develop a strategy to reach young adults. You want to put people on that team, probably that are young adults, maybe even teenagers, and get them to come up with what's the current reality of that. You don't want to miss these two steps. You want to make sure you're dosing them with reality. And okay, based on that, what's the first thing we could do to make the biggest impact? And first thing this church is going to do is they want to hire a part-time next-gen coordinator. That's somebody that has that expertise. It may be a school teacher, maybe somebody in ministry, or I don't know. But that's what they wanted to do. I didn't tell them that's what they needed to do. That's what they wanted to do. They're going to have to come up with the money and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then then you do that with whatever your third one is. You don't want more than 3. 4 gets it's just mathematically, it's more complicated. With 3, you're bang, bang, bang. And then once you start them, then there's a cumulative effect. You start the strategy, well, that's going to probably impact how you're going to reach young adults, probably. Particularly even with young people. I'm surprised at how many churches don't have a introduction to Christianity for kids and youth and adults. They expect them to get it. I did twice a year. I had what it means to be a Christian for children, and did it by age 1st through 3rd, 4th through 6th. I did it for youth, and I taught it myself for adults. Myself. I farmed the others out. I did it twice a year, and always had people saved. So this strategy map is easy to use. It's simple, but it's a process that guides you. And then once you get this, once you have this, then you want to take that information and, that becomes part of your accountability. One of the exposures you're going to find in your church is you may not have a mechanism by which to execute this stuff. You may not have a leadership council. You may not have a church council that's functioning. Who's going to do this? That's the question. Who is going to do this? Because just to do it and not have anybody to execute it is deflating. We did all that. So what? You'll never get them to do it again. If you don't do something with it, you'll never get them to do it again. They'll go, oh, we tried that 20 years ago. All right? My friend David Francis, who did training for years, said it's always 2 o'clock in hell. So we're not quite to 2 o'clock, but it's harder, isn't it? It is. It's always 2 o'clock in hell. So yeah, go ahead.
So as we work this out, what have you seen like? All right, so we got our 3 or 4 main ones. We do those. Now that we're ready for the next 3 or 4, go through the same process again.
Yeah.
Would you recommend? Is there a way that you can have that same group?
No.
You would want different people,
Yeah,
right?
Hopefully in 3 or 4 years you've had some new and fresh. And actually what you could do is you wouldn't have to do the whole enchilada. If you learn how to do this, you can do it with a specific age group or need, like evangelism.
Right.
We want to take that. What's the current reality?
Right.
You could have a team. This is teaching people, one, how to work together, helping them understand who they are, where they are. And then once you kind of get that in the DNA, then what I've done is then I do components, and not the whole shooting. Now maybe in 5 years, you might want to do the whole thing again, but after 18 months, you're probably going to want to do a particular component, because change brings change. And if you don't address that change, then you get stagnant once again. So it's a continual process. But what I like about it is that it's New Testament. I just preached last year through the book of Acts, and the word that kept coming up again and again is one accord.
That's right.
They were one accord. They didn't vote on stuff. You know, I don't know where we got that. I think it came out of the Civil War, and people wanted to, you know, they wanted to be corporate and cool and all that. But the New Testament was, they had leadership, and the Holy Spirit guided them, and they were with one accord. If you got to vote on something, it ought to be a slam dunk. You know, I guess what I've always not understood, why would churches vote on something that's not going to pass? Why would you do that? That's a tool of the devil. If it's not going to pass, why would you vote on it? Let's come to consensus. Let's come to agreement. Maybe it's the timing isn't right. I grew up in a troubled church, and the biggest split was over whether to have wine or Welch's grape juice in communion. And the wine group lost. And the whole family, this whole block, got up and walked out of the church. And my family quit going. We weren't the wine bunch, but my dad said, I'm not going to go to church fight. So I quit going to church when I was 14. And I just got wounded by voting. And I just think this is a collaborative piece where consensus means I can live with it. It may not mean I'm, you know, because that may not be my area of expertise. I am grossly ignorant in certain areas. And there's people who know a whole lot more about stuff than I do. But I'm smart enough to say, well, I can live with that. You know, in particular, if it's an integrated approach and if it's intended to help move the ball down the field in fulfilling the Great Commission. Is this going to bring more people to Christ? Is this going to help people become more like Christ? Is this going to help us be more mission-minded? Is this going to help us be more cooperative with other brothers and sisters? So, you know, what I like about it is when Lifeway hired me to do pastoral ministries, right after I got there, they decided they wanted to develop a consulting model for fee, and they wanted me to do it. And so I looked at a lot of different models and visited different places. I went to Dallas and went through their WildWorks training and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I came out of that with was that the processes that work are collaborative. They aren't consultant driven. The places that hired a consultant to come in and tell them what to do, almost without exception, they didn't do it. And it's always collaborative. And almost without exception, the people who do this, most of it they do. You know. So anyway. All right. One pastor said, "All minds clear," whatever that means. Don't hand somebody a microphone and ask them if all minds are clear. You know. Don't do that. All right, Ken.